You are looking live right now at Burbank, California. You are also looking live at Dallas, Texas, where across the country right now, it is one of the biggest days in primary politics. Super Tuesday. Donald Trump could very well sweep all 15 states tonight, prompting questions about if and when Nikki Haley could announce her departure.
I think she's very negative for the party, but she's not a problem in terms of winning because we're winning by a lot.
I don't know why everybody's so adamant that they have to follow Trump's lead to get me out of this race.
And you are looking live right now down the road from us at the White House, where President Biden is tonight. He's focused on Thursday, not Super Tuesday.
The president will make clear in his State of the Union that he will continue fighting to lower costs for families.
So, are we just hours away until the unofficial start of the 2024 general election? Come on in. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on News Nation. All right, here we are, and on Super Tuesday, here we go, hanging out on the Hill. Scott Bolden, News Nation contributor and the former D.C. Democratic Party chairman. Roma Daravi is the former Trump White House Deputy Director of Strategic Communications. Vic Mulvaney, News Nation contributor and, of course, former Trump White House Chief of Staff. Johanna Mosca, News Nation contributor and former Obama administration official. And joining us remotely for a bit, Chris Steyerwalt, host of The Hill Sunday. Hello, Chris, and News Nation. Hello, News Nation political editor. All right, hello to you all here in studio. Chris hanging out for a bit. You know, normally on Super Tuesday, we talk about these are the states and these are the candidates and who needs to win this and what does it mean going forward. The going forward, Mick, is the general at this point, is it not? Is that where things go here in the next 24 to 48 hours?
Sure, in a much more formal way. Look, the general election started back in January because as soon as you got out of Iowa, it was pretty clear that Donald Trump was going to be the Republican nominee. So to a certain extent, the general has been going on for a couple of months. But yeah, now you start wondering, does Nikki Haley actually formally throw in the towel tomorrow after she gets crushed tonight? I got to think that she probably does, and if not, she's got some explaining as to why she doesn't. But certainly, you're going to start to see Trump now already focus more on Biden than on Nikki Haley. And of course, Biden's been attacking Trump the last several months anyway, so no real change there.
Steyerwalt, set the scene for me.
Well, look, the hypothetical, what we're going to get to see tonight is not just moving into the general election for Trump and Biden. We're going to get to see in key Senate races around the country, right? And in key House races around the country. Americans have been dreading this rematch of 2020 for a year at least. And what we're going to get tonight, though, or tomorrow, is basically this is the reality. And the interesting thing is that once that happens, polls change, attitudes change, things change when it goes from the abstract to the concrete, and things are going to get concrete in a bunch of key races tonight.
I would add on Chris, and we were together. We were saying, you know, this is not a rematch that any American wants back in 2022 on election night. And I feel like now we've been in the general election since then. I'm watching tonight those down ballot races because Haley being in it, does that have any effect on some of the congressional districts and whether you may get a more moderate candidate? Because in some cases, like North Carolina, you've got a very MAGA extreme woman who was at the Capitol running against a colonel, and if she has an effect on races like that because she brings people to the polls, you may see her want to stay in.
Okay, story that I saw today that caught my attention. It got me thinking, for a second. Axios, Biden's new strategy, go for Trump's jugular. Biden is convinced he'll rattle Trump if he taunts him daily. Other sources tell us Axios says that Biden is looking for a fight. Scott, why do you think the Biden campaign wanted this story out right now? And why hasn't he done this, gone forward with this quote-unquote fight well before now?
Be patient. Just be patient. Listen, this is a big week for Biden. He's going to have Super Tuesday. The lines of demarcation between he and Trump are going to be defined even further, the contrast. And then he gets to do the State of the Union. And this is the unofficial direction of the Biden campaign. It'll be Biden-Trump. They're going to take it to him, his crudeness, his crassness, his corruption. They're going to draw that distinction and make it about the abortion and democracy and the economy, despite what the Republicans think, because it's getting better. And he's going to be very aggressive about that.
Get Roma in.
Yeah, I love that you think that they have a strategy like that. I don't see it. Speaking as someone who worked in White House comms, right now, if I look at the Biden White House, they're throwing everything they can at the wall and just trying to see what sticks. You know, today he had an event talking about the economy and how he's going to lower prices for the American people. It's Super Tuesday. That is not going to convince anyone going to the polls right now to change their vote. They already know what Joe Biden has done for the economy over the last 3 years, and it hasn't helped them.
Biden is convinced he'll rattle Trump if he taunts him daily.
Yeah, there's a little bit. I'm going to agree with half of what Scott said. I agree with Scott up until the second half of what he said. I did Morning in America on News Nation this morning with Chris Hahn. Chris is on the show with us from time to time, the aggressive progressive. I love doing that segment. And all he did the entire time this morning was beat up on Trump. That was it. And I'm wondering now if the Democrats have decided, you know what, we've been trying to sell this better economy to people. It hasn't been working. We've been trying to sell foreign policy. It hasn't worked. Let's just make this election about Donald Trump, up or down.
And it is about Donald Trump because America is still, he's ahead in the polls or tied with Biden. And you still have this criminal trial that's going to be taking place next month or later this month. And so America just hasn't focused on it.
All right, well, two of the states, first states where polls will close tonight, will give us a pretty decent clue as to how Nikki Haley could do tonight, which of course leads to the question, then what does she do after this? Steyerwalt here to break it all down. Chris, what are you looking for here in the first couple hours or so?
This is the breakdown, Escape from New York edition. When the first polls close at the top of the hour, we are going to learn a lot about what kind of night Nikki Haley is in for at 7 p.m. Eastern, we will hear from voters in what may be the two best opportunities for the long shot challenger, Virginia and Vermont. You see them in orange, though Trump should be orange, but okay. Virginia has 48 delegates and Vermont just 17. Tiny compared to the Wales, California, and Texas with 169 and 161 delegates respectively. But Virginia and Vermont provide an early test of whether Haley can avoid getting knocked out tonight, shut out tonight. That's in part because of the politics of both of these states. They both have lots of moderates and old school Republicans. Both are Democratic at the federal level, but both have popular Republican governors who are not MAGA brand. In 2016, Marco Rubio, back when was the top conservative Trump foe, nearly won Virginia and came away with 16 delegates compared to 17 for Trump. In Vermont, John Kasich, the moderate's choice in 2016, tied Trump 8 delegates each. That's Haley country. Those two states are Haley country. It's also in part because of the rules. Neither state has partisan registration, so any registered voter can participate in today's contest. That was a boon to Haley in New Hampshire, right next door to Vermont. Her supporters are mostly Republicans, but she's counting on independents and a handful of Democrats. Haley has a rules problem, too, though. It's the same one she's facing all night: support thresholds. Vermont allocates its delegates statewide based on the proportion of the vote, unless one candidate gets, 50% of the vote or more. Then the winner gets everything. It's a little better in Virginia for Haley, where they do most of the delegates by congressional district and just 12 of them statewide. In 5 or 6 of the state's 11 districts, Haley has a real chance to win, especially in the suburbs of D.C., where she won the primary just this past weekend. But Commonwealth-wide and in the rest of the district, she faces the same cliff. If Trump gets an outright majority, Haley gets nothing. And that's a story from coast to coast for Haley tonight, including California and Texas. The rules, including many changes pushed by Team Trump, mean that in the words of the great philosopher Ricky Bobby, if you're not first, you're last.
And it's a long night, so we might need some Mountain Dew tonight from that movie as well.
And we're getting that humor all night till midnight.
Okay, and that's why you got to watch News Nation.
Chris, hey, it's Mick. Have you seen any polling in Vermont or Virginia? I've not. I've not had a chance to see if she's actually got a chance in those states. I understand what you're saying about the structure and the makeup and the fact that they don't register partisan. Have you seen any polling that gives you any insights?
No, but what we know about the electorate in these states, so basically, Vermont should be Haley's best shot, probably, right? She's, and one other thing, Mick, and you'll appreciate this. This is something we've talked about before. Haley doesn't really need people to vote for her. She just needs them to not vote for Donald Trump. So in a lot of these states, there are other names still on the ballot. So if Republicans don't want to support Nikki Haley because they think she's a rhino or whatever they don't like about her, they can still go vote for Ron DeSantis, because if that all adds up to keeping Trump under 50%, that gets Haley delegates. And I agree with you that I think it's very unlikely that we get through tonight and people say, there's a path forward for Haley. But if she can score a couple places, if she could win Vermont, if she could pick up, if she could hold Trump under 50%. Other states like Minnesota have much higher thresholds, I think 80%. So if she can show strength here, then she can make some argument to people to keep harassing Donald Trump on down the trail.
Yeah, but Chris, Scott Bolden here, whether she gets swept by Donald Trump or whether she wins some delegates or some states, doesn't she have to make the case and explain why she stays in the race after Super Tuesday, if you will?
Well, first of all, I'm glad that you're not on the panel with me up here tonight, because if I had to sit next to somebody dressed as well as you, I would feel a lot worse. I'm much better off next to Leland, so I don't get the bad
I'm a Democrat.
comparison.
Give me a break.
I know. It's just the vibes. But look, Nikki Haley, I interviewed her on Sunday, and the first thing I asked her was, aren't you sick of people asking you when you're going to drop out? And I think at this point for Haley, the MAGA people couldn't hate her more, right? It's not like there's another layer of hate. They already call her Nimrata. They're already, they already despise her. So if you're Haley, while I generally agree with Mick that it's like, now what? But if you're Haley, there's also the idea of what are you going to do to me now? As my boss used to say, they can kill us, but they can't eat us.
Chris, we got to leave it there with you, bud. I know you'll be on our...
Who was his
he was right to not ask the question, but he was right to not ask the question, when are you going to drop out? Because the media has been too quick to write her off. I mean, we've got so many people voting today. It has been unfair. I want to see what they're going to do tonight.
Chris, we'll see you tonight. Special coverage, 7 to 12 here on News Nation. Catch you then, Chris. See you, brother. All right, by the way,
we'll be there.
With the primary, the primary in Texas today, we know of at least one Nikki Haley supporter, Mark Cuban. Shark Tank, Dallas Mavericks fame, has revealed he is voting for Haley, but it's what he said about the general election that has grabbed headlines. The billionaire entrepreneur essentially saying he will vote for Biden over Trump in any circumstance, telling Bloomberg this about Biden, quote, if they were having his last wake and it was him versus Trump and he was being given last rites, I would still vote for Joe Biden.
Well, that's one shark. We have another shark that's sat right here at the News Nation Hill table who definitely disagrees. Mr. Wonderful has said many times he's taken almost all of his businesses out of Democrat states because of Joe Biden's policies and the way that they're impacting running a company. It's just not able to be done in this economy with Joe Biden's policies.
All right, Joe Biden has nothing to do with how businesses are regulated at the state level. But there again, the Republicans love blaming Joe Biden for everything.
All right, coming up here, Super Tuesday results will roll in tonight. We, of course, will follow them throughout the evening here on News Nation. Donald Trump already, though, secured a huge victory from the Supreme Court. The justice is saying that states cannot remove the former president from the ballot. Only Congress can try. So does that pose a threat to democracy? Plus, Bitcoin had a roller coaster day, briefly hitting an all-time high, then sinking 10%. Should public pensions buy into Bitcoin? And what should the government do with its $12 billion worth? Anthony Pompliano joins us here on The Hill moments from now when The Hill on News Nation returns. All right, welcome back here to The Hill. So a suspect on the terror watch list tonight is under arrest after crossing the border in Texas. DHS sources telling our Allie Bradley that the man from Colombia was apprehended in Eagle Pass last month in that area, believed to then be headed to Houston. It comes just a day after the Supreme Court temporarily blocked the law in the state of Texas that allows police to arrest illegal immigrants crossing the border. Joining us now, News Nation legal contributor Jesse Weber. Hello, Jesse. Happy Super Tuesday. Talking now about the #1 issue to voters basically anywhere you go right now across this country. At least the polls tell us that. The Supreme Court case, what's it all about and what can we expect with it going forward?
Yeah, happy Super Tuesday, everybody. So, yeah, huge issue. This is about whether or not Texas's law, which actually criminalizes illegal immigration, right? This is not just Texas, like their Operation Lone Star, where they dedicate more resources to protecting the border. This is actually a law that criminalizes illegal entry. The question is it constitutional, and what's going to happen? So the Supreme Court has temporarily halted this law from going into effect. They have until, I believe, March for the Texas to respond. I believe the Supreme Court is ultimately going to halt this in the indeterminate future. Why do I say that? Because, number one, the Biden administration would have to show a likelihood that they would win on this case, and they will. This is clearly a federalism issue. This is clearly Texas getting involved in undermining the federal authority of the ability to handle immigration. And so I think that this is not going to ever go into effect. I think they're immediately going to halt this law. I can understand the rationale behind it, but I don't think it's going to have much legal success.
All right, also happening, Jesse, in that state, the Tesla CEO Elon Musk is weighing in on the Travis County District Attorney's race, the second wealthiest man in the world, weighing in on a local DA race. Bloomberg is reporting that Musk emailed his Tesla employees urging them to vote out the, quote, far-left district attorney. Now, in that email, Musk shared his support for the candidate, Jeremy Silverstein, who will, quote, actually prosecute crimes while declaring it's, quote, time for a change. It is election day, Jesse, in that state. Is there anything wrong with CEOs telling their employees, you know what, vote for candidate X or Y?
From a legal point of view, no. Employers are not restricted from telling their employees or suggesting to their employees who to vote for. It gets into tricky territory if you end up punishing your employees for voting for a certain person, or you force them to vote for a certain person. But right now, this is just a mere suggestion. Elon Musk is in the clear in my eyes.
You guys got any beef with this?
No, I don't have a beef, but I have another question for Jesse, and that's this.
I'm here.
Having managed 100 lawyers, what comes after that, though, if he treats them differently because they didn't vote, or he thinks they didn't vote, if he cuts their salary or takes any negative action, real or perceived, against them, which is why I would never recommend any employer tell employees that who they should vote for or who not, because those lawsuits could follow, and HR would be cringing right now.
Scott, you said it right. Is he allowed to do it? Sure. Should he do it? No, that's a separate question. So I think we can all agree on that.
Jesse, it's Mick Mulvaney. Come back to the Texas thing for a second and help me, because I tend to agree with everything that you just said. Here's my question. How do you reconcile that with all the laws in the various jurisdictions about sanctuary cities? Isn't that the same thing in Texas on the other side of the coin, where they're not enforcing federal law when they should be?
You're talking about the Supreme Court case.
Exactly. How are sanctuary cities any different than what Texas is trying to do to enforce the law?
So really what this is an attempt by the state of Texas, to basically take control of immigration policy. It's criminalizing it. It would interfere with the asylum system we have set up. It would interfere with judges. It would interfere with the ICE program. And that's where the concern is. That is the difference between allowing something and now permitting it to happen. So I really don't believe that this is a situation where this law can stand. As I said before, it's different than allocating resources and the National Guard to protect the border versus criminalizing. Remember, this would actually send these people to jail or allow a judge to deport them. That is not the authority of the state. And by the way, let me just say real quick, if you allow this to happen, you would potentially be allowing a state to interfere with America's position towards Mexico. That is a problem in and of itself.
It is interesting. And Mick, I was wondering some of the same, like, could Republicans use this and could we actually get agreement? You know who could do something? Congress. Congress could actually act.
Or the president.
Jesse Weber, we got to.
So could the White House, you know, the federal government did their job, then Texas wouldn't feel the need to put all these extra
trust me, I could wind you all up on immigration if you want to do that, but we got to run a break real quick. Jesse Weber, News Nation legal contributor. Thank you, sir. We'll talk to you soon. Come on back. Still to come here. From the Hill on News Nation. Bitcoin setting a new, at least for a moment earlier today, all-time high. So what does it mean? And what about the concept of, you know what? Should the government start investing in this stuff? Should your pension fund start investing in this? The argument for maybe why that's the case on the other side of the break. I talk with Anthony Pompliano. You might know him as Pomp. He joins us in moments. And did you see this headline? What about a tax deduction for Little League? The government on deck to get involved in kids' baseball? You take the kid on a road trip, should you get a tax break? The Hill on News Nation returns. All right, welcome back here to the Hill. So does President Biden have a new and unusual ally? Cookie Monster tweeting about shrinkflation yesterday, saying, quote, "Me hate shrinkflation, me cookies are getting smaller." And that caught the attention of the commander-in-chief.
Some of the small snack companies, you won't, and think you won't even notice what they're doing. But I tell you who did notice, the Cookie Monster. He pointed out his cookies are getting smaller, paying the same price. I was stunned when I found out that's what actually happened.
We've reached that part of the election season, Johanna.
With the Sesame Street. Do you remember Big Bird and the big debate over Big Bird? It's like every election. Every election we go there. Every election we go there.
What does cynical Mulvaney say about it?
Cynical Mulvaney says that PBS funding is up again and that Cookie Monster is definitely on Biden's side. There's no question about it. He wants his government cheese. There's no question about it.
There you go.
Hey, I want wholesome
For his
programming.
government cookies.
Have you talked to the Cookie Monster? Have you checked with the Cookie Monster about his politics?
No,
or
look
her
at me. Look at me.
politics?
Who do I talk to? I talk to Oscar the Grouch.
There you go. Former White House Chief of Staff. All right, well, as President Biden and Cookie Monster fret about shrinkflation, have you seen what Bitcoin is doing? The cryptocurrency briefly hitting a new all-time high today, touching 69,000 before falling as much as 10% shortly after that, now trading a bit above 63,000 right now. Believers argue that this proves that Bitcoin is indeed a hedge against inflation. Joining us now, Anthony Pompliano, partner at Pomp Investments. Pomp, great to have you back here on the Hill. Appreciate the time. Your newsletter got my attention yesterday because this is what you wrote about. You said the first public pension funds to buy Bitcoin are up 10x right now. Should pension funds and government be investing in this?
Well, I think there's two different things. Let's talk pension funds first. In the United States, if you look at all the state public pension funds, there was 4 state pension funds that were actually fully funded in 2023. And so that means that they are underfunded. They have made promises and they don't have the money currently to pay back those promises when it comes due. And so they've got to do something different. The definition of insanity is if you keep doing what you're doing and expect different results. And so here what we're seeing is if they had gone back, I actually wrote a piece in 2018 that said every public pension fund should buy 1% of their assets and put it in Bitcoin. If they lose it, they're going to lose 1%. They're still underfunded, right? But if it works, it could actually be helpful. About 14% of all their assets now would be in Bitcoin. It's about 14x from that point. And so that would bring from 4 to 14 different pensions being fully funded. And so I think that then you can go look at the governments. There is a global race. There's 21 million Bitcoin. Right now, we know El Salvador, a couple of other smaller countries are buying Bitcoin or mining Bitcoin. But what happens if all of a sudden a large geopolitical player, they either start to buy the ETFs or they go buy Bitcoin directly? At that point, the United States and other large countries are going to have to make a decision. Do I wait? Do I actually sit this out? Or do I try to get some of this Bitcoin and try to have some meaningful percentage of that 21 million?
You're saying like if the public investment fund in Saudi Arabia, for example, goes forward and says, you know what, we're throwing money at this.
I think it's interesting that the ETFs are now available. Historically, if one of the other countries outside the United States had gone and bought a bunch of Bitcoin and it was considered either an ally or a potential enemy of the United States, there would be geopolitical risk. Why are they buying it? But now, if you simply get financial exposure through the ETFs, you actually don't hold the Bitcoin, but you get to participate in a price appreciation. And so it would not surprise me whatsoever that sovereign wealth funds are going through the ETFs to get the exposure.
Okay, I hear you, and you make the argument, but you also know, Pomp, and you know this better than I do, that there's real skepticism out there, right? This was a poll from Pew last year, 75% of the country not confident in crypto's safety and reliability. So what would you say to the folks who say, you know what, I'm not quite there just yet?
That gives me confidence that we're onto something. My job as an investor is to go find contrarian bets early that will become consensus later on. And so in terms of finding Bitcoin when no one else believes in it, you want to go and allocate capital then. And then as more and more people get convinced of its value, that is where you reap the return. And so if you had run that same poll 10 years ago, it would have been 99% think that it is not valuable. Today it's 75, eventually it'll be 50, and then at some point it'll be like 5% think it's not valuable or isn't safe, sturdy, etc.
Okay. RFK Jr., of course, presidential candidate, polling somewhere between 10 to 15%, give or take, whatever poll you look at on whatever given day. Here's what he said. I want to get your reaction on the other side of the break. He basically, we don't have the sound, Pomp, but he basically pitched Bitcoin as a freedom technology and said, that it is something that should be available to the middle class. The reason why I bring up RFK Jr., we're in the middle of a presidential race, as you know, Pomp. Where's the Bitcoin community on who, and maybe it's not, you know, one way or the other, but where is the community as to who might be the best presidential candidate or preferred candidate as it relates to Bitcoin and the presidential race?
When it comes to Bitcoin and politics, I think one thing that is interesting, there's a lot of young people who look at this as a single kind of issue vote, right? They say, if you are for Bitcoin, I'm interested in your message. If you are not for Bitcoin, I am not interested in you as a candidate. And that's not everyone in the Bitcoin community, but there is a larger percentage than you would think. The other thing is that I think RFK here is correct, right? If you look at 50% of Americans, and they tend to be the bottom 50% in the economic ladder, they save 100% of their wealth. They have no investable assets. And so inflation and the debasement of the currency eat away at that. They literally have this hidden tax that are getting at their funds. And so if now they are given a savings technology like Bitcoin that they can simply just save their wealth in, they don't have to go try to trade. They don't have to go try to figure out what's the next great stock to invest in. Saving their hard-earned economic value could actually have a material impact on their positioning, their purchasing power, and ultimately their pursuit of financial freedom.
Any comment on the Cookie Monster? No, I'm messing with you, Pomp. We'll leave it there. Anthony Pompliano, founder of Pomp Investments. We'll catch you around soon. Pomp, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yep, catch you soon. Meantime, if you are a parent of kids who play sports, you know this, it ain't cheap. The editorial board of the Wall Street Journal cites a recently released report from the Olympics Commission, which raises the idea of being able to write off certain coaching and travel-related sports costs. This was the opinion from, or the piece from the Wall Street Journal, a tax deduction for Little League. What about this concept?
You know, having kids isn't cheap. Like, we know.
I know, trust me.
I mean,
cheap. I say it all the time.
Honestly, you know, I'm a fiscal conservative and socially liberal, and a flat tax would be more fair than what we have right now. Warren Buffett has been saying it over and over. We've got a problem because we've got our secretaries who can't take all of these deductions, making less than the CEO who's taking all of these deductions. Okay. I don't understand how we got here where they recommended this.
But here's the deal. The tax deduction for parents, I've lived through this too, would be awesome. I mean, just from a personal, selfish standpoint, the idea of having a federal government agency regulating youth sports around the country seems a bit of overkill. But this commission that the legislators put together is making these recommendations.
There's an Olympics Commission that put out a report that basically floated this idea of if you go on a travel with the kid or kids.
It's like a business expense.
Yeah, it's like a business expense, or coaches, a business expense. The former budget director would say.
I hate this for the same reason I hate the student loan forgiveness program. It's the government picking winners and losers. Your kids do baseball, you get a tax deduction. Your kids get football, you don't get a tax deduction.
And my kid does art.
Gymnastics,
so,
art.
Travel is classical ballet, so that would not make, you know,
you're going to make people whose kids aren't playing baseball pay more tax to help subsidize people who do play.
Mick, it would be across the board.
You'd have to make everything a deduction.
All youth sports.
I'm with her on the flat tax, by the way. I think that's the easier way to do it.
We'll talk about the flat tax another day. Coming up, Congress taking another swipe at TikTok. They are once again trying to ban TikTok here in the U.S. So why now? Does this have anything to do with something that the state of Montana just did? We'll explain. The Hill on News Nation. Back in a few. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on News Nation. So are we witnessing a 1-2 punch to potentially ban TikTok? Possibly here. A bipartisan House bill introduced today here in Washington would force ByteDance, the Chinese company that owns TikTok, to divest the app or face a U.S. ban. It also comes, by the way, just a day after the state of Montana appealed a judge's ruling that blocked the statewide ban, saying that consumer protections outweigh First Amendment concerns. Am I on to something here? You've got Montana going after them with the appeal, and then Congress coming in with a bipartisan measure.
Yeah, go ahead.
In August of 2020, Trump from the White House signed an executive order trying to ban TikTok for this exact legislation that's now going through with bipartisan support. So it's great to see that now you have both sides of the aisle trying to protect the American people, when in reality you have a lot of young people that are influencers, young businesses that are just trying to get their word out there in the digital world today. It's not necessarily a bad thing that they're using this medium, but we need to have it move to the U.S. or they are not safe and their data is not safe.
To be fair, though, I asked Trump in September of 2020, are you going to make a decision on a TikTok ban? And he said, we'll do it quickly.
Yeah.
You know, you're smirking because you know what that means. That's really a non-answer in Trump world. And here we are, what is this, 3.5
Come back
years
to the
later?
Go ahead.
Congressman Gallagher has also said that Trump was not actually ready to do it. It was just, you know, and he's been trying to ban TikTok. I would like to see it banned. I think you're right, the vulnerability exists, but we're going to need bipartisan action to
and I
actually
think
do
what they're
it.
learning is it's really hard to do.
Yes.
The other side of the story is that there's actually an interest in doing it, right? I mean, it's nice to see the states leading. That's what the states used to do really, really well. And it's nice to see a bipartisan piece of legislation. There's not many things in this town right now that have bipartisan support. Opposition to China is one of them.
But you know, Mick, if it's a real issue with sensitive information or the Chinese are spying on us, I see these ads where these small businesses and young people are talking about getting the word out and promoting their business. There are other mediums to get your word out to promote your business.
Absolutely.
It's not just TikTok, so I don't understand why there's so much pushback.
Let's ask about it. Joining us now, Katie Lee. She is a TikToker with nearly 1.5 million followers. Her TikTok videos have some 65 million views so far. Katie joining us here on the Hill. Katie, thanks for joining us. Appreciate the time. So I wonder, when you heard about Congress putting this forward, you have 1.5 million followers. You make a living off this. This is your earning, your I guess maybe your livelihood, at least financially. You think Congress is on the right side of this?
Okay, well, I think that this push to ban TikTok won't affect me personally too much, only because while TikTok is an avenue I use to post dance videos, it's more like a hobby I tend to. And at the front, I do seem like a popular content creator. And I think this applies to a lot of content creators as well, young people on TikTok that post a lot. But the money that I earn from TikTok is an income I earn on the side. And I am a full-time university student. So
good for you. And I heard you voted. I heard you voted today too, by the way, in California, where you're talking to us from.
Yes, just came back from that.
Nice.
Do
you have concerns, Katie, on the security side at all? Because that's the argument from Washington, which is this is a Chinese controlled company. They have data on anyone who signs up, me, you, anyone in between here in the U.S.
I think I can support a lot of young people that are on TikTok, but when people my age and younger kids are on TikTok, we're not really thinking about the security concerns. I'm 20. I'm in college. When I have free time, I'm scrolling on my phone, and I guess it doesn't really pass over my head that there are security concerns with the app. But I understand that with this push for TikTok, a lot of managements are moving over to Instagram, and that's what I'm seeing right now.
So let me ask you finally, you think this is a good move out of Washington or a bad move?
The ban for TikTok, I will say neutral stance on my part, but I will say it's a good move.
Okay. All right. We'll leave it there. Katie Lee, 1.5 million followers. It's a lot, whatever the number is. 66 million views. College student who voted today and has a popular following. Katie, appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. And that is part of the dilemma for lawmakers, is banning something that is really popular in an election year potentially.
I also wasn't thinking about my security vulnerabilities when I was 20 and doing silly things.
No.
So she admitted she's not thinking about it, but that she would
Congress has to.
Congress.
Yes.
So.
And that's the thing, is China is banning all of our social media apps, and we are not actually collecting all the data. It is high time we act.
All right, coming up here from the Hill, a GOP exodus in Washington right now. Number of lawmakers heading for the exits, saying we're done with this thing. Why a retiring congressman says he is not going to lie to his own party. I'll get some thoughts from Mick. Hot Mike with Mick on the other side of the break. And it is a famous photo taken after World War II. Not that. That is the halls of the Capitol.
Just as famous.
Do we have the photo? There it is.
There we go.
You've seen it. So why on earth would the VA say, you know what? We need to get rid of this photo. Really? We'll explain when The Hill returns. Welcome back here to The Hill on News Nation. Time for Hot Mic with Mick, where we get thoughts from Mr. Mulvaney. How about Chris Stirewalt's interview? Outgoing Congressman Ken Buck. They spoke during the first episode of The Hill Sunday. Chris asking the congressman why he decided to retire now.
There are a lot of things that went into the decision, but really we're at a time in American politics that I am not going to lie on behalf of my presidential candidate, on behalf of my party. And I'm very sad that others in my party have taken the position that as long as we get the White House, it doesn't really matter what we say.
Mick, you take any exception to what he says there?
No. I have a great deal of respect for Ken Buck. Ken is as far right-wing as you're going to get. He's from a Western state. He brings that sort of personality into the building. I'm not sure what lies he's referring to. If he's referring to the lie about the 2020 election, then I get it. Other than that, I'm not sure what his issue is, but I absolutely respect his position, and I think a lot of people in that building do as well.
But some would say that that's a pretty big issue.
Well, yeah. Listen. Trump lost the 2020 election. Period. End of story. If you're still denying that, then we have an issue. By the way, if you're still denying that, you're never going to get confirmed to be by the Senate to be in the Trump cabinet. So think about that if Trump wins. But no, I think. Listen, he feels very strongly about it. He's a man of principle. He's doing the right thing. If you don't feel like you can stay, you need to go.
Do you think we're going to see more Ken Bucks as November comes along? Like we've seen this exodus of lawmakers say, you know what, I'm done, especially in the House. Yeah. Do you think that exodus has ended, or?
No, well, I mean, it's coming to an end simply because the filing dates are coming and going. Most places now you've had to announce whether or not you're going to run because, for example, in South Carolina, you have to decide by March 30th whether or not you're going to run next year. So, yeah, you're coming to the end of it just because of the calendar.
All right, meantime, the Department of Veterans Affairs facing backlash now after plans to ban this famous 1945 photo. You've seen it for sure, of a sailor kissing a nurse in Times Square in New York, celebrating the end of World War II. There was a memo that came out that was leaked, and when I saw it, I honestly asked myself, is this real? Here's what the memo said, quote, recent discussions have highlighted concerns about the non-consensual nature of the kiss. To foster a more trauma-informed environment, photographs depicting the VJ Day in Times Square should be removed from all VHA facilities. Now, following that memo, the secretary of the VA, Dennis McDonough, reversed it, or basically came back out saying that the image will not be banned and it will be kept in VA facilities.
This is a non-controversy controversy. I mean, look, the controversy around it is evidently the woman was not at all like into kissing him. He was drunk. He grabbed her. They've evidently testified and said that was the case.
Testified.
It's never been.
They did actually. They talked to the Library of Congress, and the woman who claims she's the woman in the photo has said that this was not a consensual act. Now, Dennis McDonough is a Democrat. Dennis McDonough immediately says, we're not going to ban this photo. And so now it's like, you know, the right is going to use this and say, oh, the woke left, when a Democrat is the one who actually said, don't ban it.
Absolutely, the right is going to use this. This is going to be in Donald Trump's next speech. There's no question about it.
In Donald Trump's next speech.
Well, he grabbed women a lot of ways.
This is political correctness run amok. It absolutely is.
It is a 70-year-old picture.
There you go.
And this photo is something to be celebrated.
Come on. It's 70 years old.
My favorite line about the memo is recent discussions, which my guess is the woman who made the decision talking to herself in her sleep or something like that. Because people are not talking about this photo 70 years later.
She should have just socked him and kept it moving. How do we know she didn't do that?
I mean,
That's exactly right.
My sister would have socked him and kept it moving.
I think it's beautiful. You got a sailor and a nurse coming home from war. It's something to be celebrated. And it sounds like Republicans and Democrats agree on that.
I do find it interesting that Mick thinks it's something that Trump will talk about.
Absolutely.
We'll see. All right. Well, as we approach 7 o'clock here on the East Coast, it's Super Tuesday. Polls in Virginia and Vermont are about about to close. 16 states voting today, 15 on the Republican side, plus Iowa on the Democratic side. And for Republicans, there are more than 850 delegates at stake for Donald Trump and Nikki Haley on the Democratic side. Our partners at Decision Desk HQ project, as expected, that President Biden is the winner of the Iowa Democratic caucuses, and that state's 40 delegates. All right, special coverage here on News Nation starts in a couple minutes' time. Around the table real quick. I'll start with you, Mr. Bolden. Yep. What are you watching for tonight?
I'm watching down ballot races, but I'm also watching what I know the outcome will be, but I'm also thinking about these third-party candidates and other factors that are going to impact this general election, not just for Biden, but for Donald Trump and his upcoming criminal trial.
I'm definitely watching the Trump-Biden matchup here. I think, you'll see, depending on the numbers that come up, the media and a lot of the left try to make this about Nikki Haley. It's not about Nikki Haley anymore. We need to focus on the future, and I think that's what you'll see with a big Trump win tonight.
Maybe I'm just different than the rest of the crowd. I'm going to be watching Chris Steyerwalt.
There you go. Our guy.
Anybody who can bring up the last couple of conversations we've had on this show, he's brought up Ricky Bobby tonight. I think St. Augustine of Hippo. And Monty Python in like one show one evening. So if he can do that, I'm going to be watching him from 7 p.m. until midnight.
I'm sure it will be entertaining. I am watching the Los Angeles District Attorney's race. I have gotten more texts from people trying to figure out who they're voting for. So definitely watching it.
All right, that special coverage, as I mentioned, starts in about a minute's time here on News Nation. But before we go, from our hill to yours, tonight we are spotlighting Hill County, Texas. The county has a population of about 37,000, and the county seat, by the way, is Hillsborough. Yes. About 60 miles southwest of Dallas. Hill County is historically overwhelmingly Republican. In the 2020 election, for example, Donald Trump won with 77% of the vote. Joe Biden, 21%. The last time a Democrat won Hill County in the presidential election, you got to go back to Bill Clinton, 1992. By the way, Hill County viewers are served by our next star station, KDAF, in Dallas. Hello to you all who are watching The Hill in Hill County, Texas, and to our audience listening on Sirius XM as well. Thank you for listening. That'll do it for us here on The Hill, here on News Nation. Set your DVR to 6 o'clock Eastern, in case you need to. We'll be back here tomorrow to break down all things Super Tuesday, but our special coverage here on News Nation starts right now.
We're going to win the election. We're going to win it big. We're going to win it bigger than ever before.
70% of Americans don't want a Trump-Biden rematch.
Democracy is on the ballot. Your freedom is on the ballot.
Chris Cuomo here for the big night, along with Elizabeth Vargas, Chief Washington anchor Leland Vittert, and News Nation political editor extraordinaire Chris Steyerwalt. That's right, you owe me. Super Tuesday, okay? This one is going to live up to its name. When it comes to primaries, tonight is the night. It is the big one. 15 states, one territory, making their voices heard over 6 time zones. And here, we're going to give you uncommon coverage. No hype, no false hysterics, just reality. And the reality is the polls just closed 57 seconds ago in Vermont and Virginia. We're moments from knowing the score. We'll give it to you as soon as we get it. We're going to be taking you through the night as the returns come in, coast to coast, of course. 27 million Americans plus expected to vote. Hundreds of delegates at stake. The biggest haul for either party on any single day, hence super. The biggest question of the night, is Nikki Haley really for real? And we're going to tell you in a minute why we may know the answer on the early side. Now, as to the prohibitive favorite on the Republican ticket, Trump, battling expectations more than Haley. Will he sweep virtually all 15 states tonight? There are 865 delegates at stake for the GOP, 71% of what's needed to clinch. So, why may we know about Haley early? Vermont and Virginia. Polls just closed there. They were both 7 o'clock exit times. Both are weak spots for Trump, judged on the last election. So, if Haley wins or comes very close, I'm going to leave it to Steyerwalt and the rest of the panel to decide what that means. But that would be the statement that this night could be something that adds to her narrative. Or, if not, could be her last stand. We're going to learn a lot as the night goes on. There's a lot to unpack, and the mighty News Nation has assembled a strong team to help take us through. We're going to crunch all the numbers at the big wall with the host of News Nation Now, Connell McShane. Good to see you, brother. We're going to be checking in at the White House and Biden's campaign with News Nation Chief Washington correspondent Blake Berman. And we're going to go to Trump headquarters, Mar-a-Lago in Florida, with News Nation correspondent Brooke Schaefer. We're going to be keeping an eye on the Haley campaign. Of course, will this be a night that she comes out early because she wants to catch the narrative, or is she going to hide? We'll see, we'll see, we'll see. So I'll start with you, Brother Steigerwald. Comes close. Virginia, Vermont just closed. We'll be getting the tally when Column is ready and has it. What does comes close have to mean?
So she could win Vermont. They have a very squishy Republican governor. Vermont, a very Democratic state, has a very squishy Republican governor who's very popular there.
Squishy a term of art? Or
squishy is in the political science, in the literature. Squishy means that you get called a rhino by people like Donald Trump. But it's a state that John Kasich tied Trump with 8 delegates in 2016. Virginia. This is Youngkin territory, right? If you were looking for a governor in the country that lined up well with Haley, Glenn Youngkin lines up pretty well, right? Very conservative, but business friendly, sort of normal. Here's the key. This is the most important part. Both of these states have rules that say when a candidate gets to 50%, they sweep, they run. So this is what Haley's going to face all night, which is if she can't hold Trump under 50, and he gets to 50% in Vermont, a state that she could do well. So she could get 49.9%. If Trump gets 50.1%, he gets all the delegates. And she faces cliffs like that all night. And we're going to know here very soon just how this is going to shake out.
All right, let's do our first projection of the night.
Actually, we're going to know now, right?
Please.
Go ahead.
Me? Okay.
Yes, do the honors.
DDHQ projects that President Biden will win the Vermont Democratic primary. Okay, and DDHQ also projects that President Biden will win the Virginia Democratic primary. There are no surprises in store on the Democratic side, although we may learn something about the electorate. News Nation Now host Connell McShane, first at bat at the wall.
All right, yeah, let's not have an early strikeout then. So I'll start on the Democratic side because you made the call. As you said, there's not much drama there, but the states of both Vermont and Virginia go in the column of Joe Biden. So first of all, if you go up to Vermont right now, we're going to get the results will come in throughout the night. I don't think we'll have any live coming in on our board right now because they're not populating, but we have enough in the column to make the call for Biden, so that's already in the bag there, so to speak. Same thing with Virginia. There's some, at least the names coming up on the screen, but you're at 0% reporting. There's at least 2 strikes. Maybe it's not a complete strikeout. When you go back to Virginia, there on the statewide side, we're just not getting a population of results yet on the Democratic side. I think the Republicans are more interesting to talk about here anyway. The blue check marks next to Biden. It's going to be next to him in all of these different states. So if we switch it over to the Republican side now and just get a sense of what we're going to be looking at, Donald Trump and Nikki Haley, 862 delegates are up for grabs in 15 different states. Now, we can think about this for those states as well, because I think it's news at 7:05, almost 7:06 Eastern time, that we haven't made the calls yet, right, in a place like Virginia. So we don't have any live votes coming in. Donald Trump, the winner last time around with 35% of the vote. We're going to look through Virginia, and that's when it's going to get interesting to get in to the county level in Virginia, some of the richest counties in America, right, where Trump, Chris made the point right off the bat, struggled last time around. Look at Rubio in Arlington County with just about 50% of the vote. Another place, there's a bunch of counties right around Washington, D.C. that are worth watching, as you guys all know. Loudoun County was one that we talked about a lot. You know, the governor's race down. Look at Rubio there, 40% of the vote to Trump's 28%. So the same thing will apply, I think, in Vermont, where Chris was saying you have a Republican governor who's not a big fan of Donald Trump and Governor Scott. So let's see how those suburban counties go. Loudoun County, I think, isn't it the richest county in the entire country?
It is.
You have the Starwalts and the Viddards, people like that live in that type of an area. Well, it's near D.C. is what I'm saying. So we'll
cheap shot, McShane.
I like it. I like it.
Shot.
Keep going.
That's where we
like this kind of party.
Starts out here?
We're New Yorkers. That's all I'm saying.
This is how I like it. This is my kind of party.
And you guys are in front of us. So yeah, let's see how Trump does with the highly educated voters, the likes of which you're sitting with here.
Well, Leland, that's the big break, right? Column, thank you. Of course, part of the party all night long. The big break with Haley and Trump comes down to education level and voters, right?
Education level, income level, and sort of working class. Yeah, gender, but also working class, professional class, which I guess goes to education as well. It was telling that Nikki Haley held her first rally in Virginia in a city that Joe Biden won by 50 points. And the only primary contest she's won was D.C., that she won handily. So there's a certain Republican voter that is very much a Nikki Haley voter. That's just not the majority of the Republican primary electorate, which is her problem.
Right. But the question always is, and always has been, and I want to get back to what you were talking about, Chris, when we got those calls in just a few moments ago, is where does Nikki Haley go after tonight? Donald Trump desperately wants her out. He's been trying to wish-cast her out whenever he gets in front of a microphone. We understand she has no events scheduled after tonight. She's always said, I will stay in through Super Tuesday. Today is Super Tuesday. Of course, raising the question tonight, later on. Her biggest donors have stopped donating. The Koch brothers, they've shifted their prodigious fundraising and donating to other candidates who still have a chance. So the question is what does she do after tonight? How long does she stick into this thing, or does she call it quits?
Well, I mean, not to be too obvious, but that's sort of what we're going to find out
tonight.
So there's a story that Nikki Haley can tell that comes out of tonight. And as we tabulate, and as they're tabulating these numbers in Vermont and in Virginia, Nikki Haley's path is being determined. Because if she gets shut out everywhere, right? So how about this? Does it matter if Dean Phillips drops out? No. Dean Phillips can stay in the race.
She's getting a lot more votes than Dean Phillips.
No, I know, but I'm saying if she gets shut out tonight, she got no delegates, she loses 15 states, Trump hits the threshold everywhere, and she gets absolutely just crushed. She can stay in, she can drop out. It doesn't really matter because she's not affecting the race. And that's the comparison to Phillips. Joe Biden doesn't care whether Dean Phillips runs or not. Dean Phillips lost to Marianne Williamson after Marianne Williamson had dropped out of the race. That's not a good feeling.
True.
So I guess what I'm saying is, if Haley wins Vermont, let's say, and Connell was talking about, Virginia does its delegates by congressional district, most of its delegates by congressional district. There are 5 or 6 congressional districts in Virginia that Nikki Haley could win, and she could get pretty close. So,
but even if she wins them, she has no shot at winning the nomination.
What does the difference between her outcome in New Hampshire and her outcome in Michigan? When we think about New Hampshire, it's like, oh, that's pretty interesting. She did pretty well in New Hampshire. She sort of held him close. And then in Michigan, what was the net effect delegate-wise? Marginal.
Right.
It's about what George H.W. Bush called the big mo. You want to be able to say, like, oh, this fight is still on. Because in the end, and I really believe this, for Haley and for Republicans who support her, there is a ransom to be demanded from Donald Trump, which is to say, you're going to come negotiate with me. You're going to say nice things about conservatives and moderate voters. You're going to not say that MAGA was exiled, and you're going to have to meet me and make peace and make terms, not just.
Is that the Ted Cruz model?
Oh, nobody wants the Ted Cruz
that's
model.
why I brought it up.
No, you don't want to get booed by your home state delegation at the convention. That's never a good feeling.
Isn't she at some point in danger of that, depending on how far she pushes this?
I think freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose, right? They already hate her. The MAGA people hate her. They call her Nimrata. They say every mean thing about her, and they do all that. So what's she going to do, right? For Ted Cruz, one of Ted Cruz's problem was he was like Ron DeSantis, always thinking about the next cycle, always thinking about the next cycle. Nikki Haley, and I didn't ask her this when I interviewed her on Sunday, but look, maybe she just doesn't care. Maybe she just genuinely says,
she's certainly sharpening the rhetoric.
I'm going to stick it to you, and you're going to come and ask me for my endorsement.
You think there's zero chance that he picks her as VP?
And again, not to keep copping out this way, depends on how
copping out.
I know, that's my job. I'm from Washington. That's what I do.
Yes, there's a very good chance he picks her for 2 reasons. Number one, there is nothing Donald Trump loves more than the romance of reconciliation. And it is something that he talks about.
That's a great line.
Oh,
my gosh.
There we go.
The romance
use that
of reconciliation. Woo. Okay.
My work here is done.
Continue.
It's all downhill from here.
The second point, and this is back to Sir Steyerwalt, Donald Trump, when he picked Mike Pence was extraordinarily pragmatic in that pick. It was somebody that he would not have looked at, but he knew he needed to shore up evangelical Christians and conservative Republicans at all. Mike Pence would bring them to the party. If Donald Trump is shown polling that who he needs to shore up is females and professional Republicans that Nikki Haley brings to the party in Georgia, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Michigan, Wisconsin, etc., I think there is a very good chance that he is willing to have that conversation, given how pragmatic he is.
Strong. So, what do we know at this point? 7 o'clock, you know, usually early on, people are trying to find ways to keep you interested. But Virginia and Vermont really do matter, and they close, so we're going to be getting more information than usual, even though we have so many states left to go. So, Connell, when you're looking at it, what do we know so far in terms of why they're coming out to vote today?
Well, we have our own exit polling data from our friends at DDHQ, so let's go through some of this, and you can tell me what stands out to you guys. On the Democratic side, the Republican side, what are the big issues? So it's close for Democrats. So you look at abortion and the economy, the top two issues there, 27 to 25%. Everything else is distant, third, fourth, and fifth. If we switch over to the right side of the Republican side, far and away, we'll get into this in more detail throughout the night, that immigration has been the issue at 44%. The economy comes in relatively high, but well behind immigration, and then it's abortion, crime, and foreign policy. One thing I'll say about foreign policy, I don't know if we'll get into this tonight, but you know, will there be a protest vote against the president somewhere? And some people are talking Minnesota. Only 9% of Democrats cited foreign policy as the top issue, so it was fifth for them overall. I thought that was somewhat interesting. We talked about immigration. Again, 44% of Republicans, it's their top issue, where the economy came in a distant second. And on the last poll about education levels, this will be something, it's been a trend throughout. High school diploma or less, Donald Trump dominates, 76% to 19% on the other side of the screen for Nikki Haley among Republicans. He wins among those with a bachelor's degree or better, but the margins are much closer. Margins will be a story tonight. We talked about the counties around Washington, D.C. As we look at the Virginia results come in, 57-36 is your split there for Trump. So he's still up, right? Even with all those education.
Can you take us back to the list of the issues for the Democrats and Republicans?
Yes, the top issues for both.
This is a very interesting thing.
Here it is.
Leland, look at how the most interesting issue for one side is basically the least for the other. Immigration, huge for Republicans. Really last, okay? Once you get under 10%.
Yeah, remember, though, that these are the crazies and the double crazies who come out for primaries, especially among Democrats, because you don't have a contested presidential primary. You've got a lot of enthusiasm for Donald Trump. That's I'll borrow that line from Sirewalt. But I'll ask Chris a question. When it comes to immigration for Republicans, how much has immigration become a proxy for general feeling of chaos in America?
Well,
I'm going to punt again.
No, I'm not going to punt.
It's only third down.
I would say that, yes, your point about the crazy of the crazy, there's much truth in that. But also, when they're being asked this question, they're being asked about an election that they're voting in, right? So as they're choosing between Nikki Haley and Donald Trump, their number one issue is immigration. When they're choosing between this person, so what do you care about when you come out to vote? So they're answering these questions in a context. But
do you think for Republicans it changes if it's Trump-Biden?
Yes.
In a general election, if it's Trump-Biden, has it changed?
It changes. The question of immigration for Republicans, they will reverse engineer their answers for Biden, whatever the case. Who do you like better on this? I like Trump. Who do you like better at being elderly? I like Trump better. No matter what the question is, they're going to say each time that they prefer Trump. But in these numbers, there are some persuadable voters, right? There are a handful of persuadable voters. So you'll see these top-line numbers change because they're thinking about these things in a different context.
Let's do a quick call here. DDHQ projects Donald Trump will win the Virginia Republican primary. Now, that is only a half answer, because, Connell, it's going to have to be about by how much, right? And we don't know yet, do we?
No, we don't. We don't have the margins were going to be the whole story. We have limited data in, so you're going on projections that our DDHQ analysts know how to do. No surprise that he wins the state. It was always going to be a question of margins and how much he would win it by. But the fact that it took us 15, 16 minutes to make the call maybe is something worth looking at. So let's dig into the state of Virginia here as we zoom in. Where are we now? Well, we're only 1% of the vote in. See, that's at the top of the screen. So you have have, among, to our estimate, 700,000 plus votes still out. 57-43 is your margin for Trump. I mean, we could try to dig in here to see if any of the counties that we were looking at closely are registering. Right off the bat, I don't see anything incoming. We're seeing
They're outside in.
Look at Loudoun up there. Is there anything in Loudoun right now? Let me see on the list here. Yes, you're right. So Loudoun, 51-46. So, all right, that's the only one of the big ones, Leland.
I mean, it's early, but that's overperforming for Trump, right? Virginia's outside in, isn't it, Leland? It goes from the outside to the population centers as opposed to population centers out. Every state's got different, different culture.
In terms of when it comes in?
Yeah.
When the vote comes in.
Yeah.
You're going to get some early stuff in Loudoun. That's probably early in absentee. I think they report that first.
The Commonwealth of Virginia is a very well-run Commonwealth, and they count very fast. So we'll get fast results all over. And these wealthy counties in these collar counties, they're going to be, they've got a lot more vote to count, but they're going to count it fast.
All right, time for a break. So we know Virginia, but it's all about the margin. We don't know Vermont, and it's all about the margin. But the numbers are going to be coming in, and the story is going to be told. Stay with us. All right, this is a big night of decision for America. News Nation's coverage is here for you on Super Tuesday. It is 7:22 and change p.m. on the East Coast, and we are getting information, and we're going to be hearing about North Carolina. Now, we have Connell McShane, News Nation Now host, who's telling us a story about this state.
Right, a little bedtime story. You know Tale of Two Cities. We're doing Tale of Two States with North Carolina about to close. We know the tale, or started to tell it in Virginia. So we're looking at Virginia and North Carolina. Virginia's already closed on the Republican side. We've called it for Trump. North Carolina, as Chris says, bottom of the hour. You look at the Republican race in Virginia. It's gone Democratic in 2008, 2012, 2016, and 2020. Democratic governor in the state of North Carolina, but it's voted Republican 2012, 2016, and 2020. A little bit of a closer zoom in here, and you look at similarities and differences of these two states that both closed this hour. The non-white vote there is almost the same. So are the moderate voters, which we're watching quite closely to see the so-called Nikki Haley effect. When we start to talk about slight differences, though, the college graduates, they're at 43% in Virginia, and the stark differences on the suburban vote goes up to 60 in Virginia versus 40 in North Carolina. So you have much more of that suburban vote in Virginia, in and around Washington, D.C. To that point, before I finish my little story, my little tale here, if we could switch our view, let's give a quick look at the live results board here, and we can come into the state of Virginia. Again, already called for Donald Trump. Where are we now? 6%. 62% is in, 38.5% for Nikki Haley. And we'll start to look at, again, some of those counties. So we were talking about Loudoun County. We're going to see when Fairfax comes in, and the votes are not coming in there yet. But Loudoun, on the margins for Haley, is much closer than we are statewide. But certainly Donald Trump enough to have the check mark next to his name in Virginia. North Carolina, bottom of the hour.
I'll be really curious to see the results out of North Carolina, especially given that governor's primary going on right now. Fascinating.
You've been talking
race.
about that for a while now.
I have. Well,
Why?
Well, because I think it's. Listen, he is the candidate as lieutenant governor, Mark Robinson. He was endorsed full-heartedly by Trump this past Saturday. Called him Martin Luther King on steroids. Trump's words, not mine. Don't laugh. That's what he called him.
Never an understatement.
My God.
I know.
What he gets away with. Just imagine if anyone else in America, in any position of public-facing prominence, said Martin Luther King Jr. on steroids.
Well, hang on.
It would be over.
It goes on because...
But there's more.
But there's more because the lieutenant governor has a quite controversial past statements and posts. He has called reports of the Holocaust, quote, hogwash. He's called the survivors of the Parkland High School shooting, quote, prostitutes who should hello, am I swearing?
I think you said something.
This guy's in big trouble. If he's talking like that, that's guy's in big trouble.
I'm not laughing. I was offended.
Should sit down and shut up. He has said, you know, at 24 hours of pregnancy, you can't abort the baby. So he is, in favor of a heartbeat law. He has said Hitler needs to be reconsidered when it was misconstrued. Lots of very, very controversial statements. Many Republican strategists are concerned that Trump's full-throated endorsement of him could hurt Trump later on. It could hurt other Republicans down ballot.
Well, and it's not just in North Carolina, right? So the story of 2022 was Republicans had great opportunities, and then they blew it because they had bad candidate choices. And in a bunch of races around the country, tonight and throughout the primary season, we're going to find out whether they can put electable candidates up or candidates that scratch.
So why did Trump back the guy?
Because he loves Trump.
Is that what it is? He's a big fan?
This guy loves Trump. He loves Trump like ice cream cones. He's just like this. Trump is a great. He dresses like Trump. He's like doing a Trump impersonation.
But it's another one of those things where it's like I think, and when you talk to Republican strategists in North Carolina, the wisdom of picking somebody just because they love you or just because they're sucking up to you.
Are you suggesting, Elizabeth Vargas, that Donald Trump does not always make strategic choices?
The question is, does he pay a price? Because you remember when he.
Does Donald Trump ever pay a price?
That's the point, right? I mean,
No.
the true Teflon Don. Look, as long as he's seen as being a proxy for people's legitimate grievances, as long as he's got the fact that what is motivating their frustration, desperation, fill in the blank, as long as that's real, and it is, then he gets to skate until they find a better agent for their animus. But remember when he backed the guy in Virginia who was the full-blown Confederate, alt-right guy and was like, this guy is really good, and they kept telling him to back off that guy. Now, of course, he lost, but he didn't pay a price for that either, and the guy was standing next to all kinds of white supremacists.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't really matter who he backs, is what I'm trying to say. He doesn't pay a cent.
It doesn't matter to him. And one of the arguments that Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, and all of the other challengers to Trump this cycle have said, we keep losing. Republicans, we keep losing. Why do we keep doing this? Since the win in 2016, it's been 2018, 2020, 2022, disappointment and loss throughout because what Trump creates his own gravity, right? He doesn't pay a price, but Georgia Republicans paid a price for Herschel Walker, and Pennsylvania Republicans paid a price for Mehmet Oz.
Virginia lost that seat.
And Virginia lost that, so it's...
All right. News Nation contributor, former acting chief of staff for President Trump, Mick Mulvaney is with us. Mick, I don't know if you have been watching, but I got an awful lot of credit for your line, the romance of reconciliation, and I wanted to give credit where credit is due.
It was fabulous.
Strong.
I'm a little hurt by the question. Did you just ask me what I've been watching this show? How could I not? And this is must-see television. So, plus I've learned some valuable things. For example, I didn't realize, and this is probably going to come out wrong, but what the heck? I'm only a contributor. I'm not really an employee. I didn't realize that Martin Luther King was anti-Semitic. You guys have taught me about that tonight. And now that he's Mark Robinson sort of writ large, I think that's tremendous insight.
It's amazing what's happened in the first half an hour. Okay, is there, as we look down at Mar-a-Lago, is there any consideration by Trump's team, and you've made the point over and over, that Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita and others are now a much more professional ring around Donald Trump? Is there a consideration now of what these candidates that are going to be governor's candidates and Senate candidates in key states will mean for Donald Trump as we look forward to the general election?
No, not exactly. I thought you were going to ask me, would it be a little bit differently run campaign? Would Trump be a little bit different out on the campaign trail? And the answer there might be yes, because of the influence of LaCivita and Susan Wiles. And you saw that. When he won in Iowa, he was very conciliatory at the end of the night. When he won in South Carolina, it was the same. I expect to see that again tonight. The outlier was New Hampshire, but I got to think that was mostly animus directed at Nikki Haley for going on stage before he did and sort of take a victory lap when she lost. So he went off message. So I think they are getting him to recognize after this is over, and I think it's over tonight, he needs to bring all the Republicans back into the fold because he needs every single one of the votes. But I don't think it's filtered down into his selection of the other folks that he decides to endorse or support. I think, what Steiwalt has said, it's just he will support whoever seems to like him the most.
All right, so general election starts tonight, if you will, and it was Joe Biden who they gave Axios the story today that the new plan for Joe Biden is to go for the jugular. Is there anybody who likes being attacked more than Donald Trump?
No, he's going to love it. It's going to be for great television. There's no question about it. I do think that under the right circumstances, you might be able to get Trump to lose his cool and do something foolish, but you'd have to sort of be on stage with him in a debate. You might be able to get him to come over and take a swing at you, for example. But I doubt that Joe Biden is ever going to actually debate Donald Trump, so you're not going to get them in the same location. What I think you're seeing here is more of this, which is the Democrats have finally decided that this whole idea, well, things are better than people realize it is. All we really need to do is convince them they're better off than they think they are. That's a losing argument. What they're going to try and do is go back to what they won on in 2020, which is we're not Donald Trump. And they're going to spend the next 8 months reminding people how horrible they think Donald Trump is. That's what this campaign is turning into as of tonight.
All right, Mick, thank you very much. Stand by with us throughout the night. Just to put a bow on what Mick was saying, I hear and I've seen from the White House this "we're not Donald Trump" campaign strategy. And I would ask Chris Stirewalt this: can that work now that Joe Biden is more than just not Donald Trump? He is now Joe Biden with 4 years of a record and with a lot of public appearances that have given voters real pause.
The way I frame that is that it will be extremely hard for Donald Trump to do as well in 2024 as he did in 2020. Or as he did in 2016.
Why?
It will be extremely hard for Joe Biden to do as well as he did in 2020, right? Trump has gotten back basically to where he was in 2020 with Republicans, but his negatives with persuadable. Like January 6th changed the frame on Donald Trump. The Republicans who are going to forget about it have forgotten about it or come to terms with it. What the Biden campaign is going to do is every day they're going to remind persuadable voters and the folks who are voting for Nikki Haley tonight and saying, you sure? You really want to put, the Barack Obama had a great closing ad in 2012 against Mitt Romney. It was a shot of the Resolute desk in the Oval Office, and it was black and white, and the camera just pushed in on that desk and asked the question, do you want Mitt Romney behind that desk? Now, it's a quainter time when Republicans said that Mitt Romney was radical. Now they love the guy. But that is the argument.
Wait, Republicans love Mitt Romney now?
No, Democrats.
Oh, okay.
So the closing argument from Biden that starts now and will run throughout is Trump's too crazy, it's too dangerous, and our guy may be old, he may be too old for this, but Trump's too dangerous.
So what percentage, I mean, right now in every contest we've seen thus far, and perhaps it'll prove true tonight, Nikki Haley has won about, give or take, 30% of the Republican voters. How many of those voters go to Trump once she drops out? And if they don't go to Trump, where do they go?
So in a state like Virginia or Vermont, where you don't have partisan registration, what percentage of Nikki Haley's voters are going to be Democrats that were never going to vote for the Republican ever? 10%.
Yeah,
so,
small.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's small.
Small. Look,
when I was in South Carolina, I didn't find a single one.
A single one?
A single person who was a Donald Trump protest Democrat voting for Nikki Haley.
And is that because you were spending the lion's share of your time trying different diner foods, which is all I seem to hear about on your feed?
On my Instagram and diner Twinkies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never seen you go deeper, and you go deep on a lot of things.
Okay, call the race. Call the race.
Come on.
Well, but this is like, again, DDHQ can now project the easy part, which is Donald Trump will win the North Carolina Republican primary, okay? And DDHQ can project that President Biden will win the North Carolina Democratic primary. But again, the story has to be the margin, and it's going to be a little more delayed in North Carolina. They have rule changes there, and one that I don't understand is this, and anybody who knows the answer, tell me. Voter ID we could talk about all night, and it's a little bit of a boogeyman issue. But they changed the rule so that you can't count ballots during the voting day. You have to wait until the poll closes and then start counting. Why?
I hate it so much. This is Pennsylvania. Republicans pushed through a similar law in 2020, and it's just a mistake. Our country needs expeditious, reliable counting of these ballots. We do not need election week because they wanted, well, so they can claim later on, oh, it was the mirage, right? We remember Trump talking about this in the 2020 election. Where did all these votes come from at 3 o'clock in the morning? We don't know. It's like, well, it was Philadelphia. They counted Philadelphia. That's where they came from. They counted Philadelphia. So look, I don't want to impugn anybody's motives, but I would just say, whether you're a Republican or whether you're a Democrat, in this country, this very, very hotly contested election year, we should have reliable, accurate, fast counting so that we can get results and have election night and not election month.
Well, it's noteworthy that in America, we are able to figure out if there's a Powerball winner faster than who won an election.
That's right. It's true. And I think it goes to the, 35 minutes, 36 minutes into the night. My first disagreement with Brother Stirewalt. I think you should impugn the motives because I think you have design flaws in this system that are done to benefit parties. And even if you say, well, it's the state that runs it, not... Well, the state officials are in what?
They're
in
a party.
And I believe that they do things that play games for their own advantage and not necessarily for transparency.
Since the earth cooled, people have looked for ways to game elections and change the rules to the advantage of their party. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, I think that those poor people, remember in Arizona when they did the audit?
Yes.
And they had to take all the ballots out to the dog track or something and count them in a barn? I think those poor people thought they were onto something, right? I think they thought that they were in search of something. And the way that we can deal with that, it's in every American's best interest. If elections officials, 99% of whom are doing the right stuff, working hard, we owe them a debt of gratitude that they're giving their time and their effort to do this. There's a lot of volunteers.
All right. We're getting yelled at.
All right. Sorry, Dusty.
If this happens from time to time, let me tell you, you know the expression
out here.
Boy, if you could hear the voices in my head, usually that means somebody needs medication.
No,
but if you could hear the voices. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we have 2 members of Congress from North Carolina. What is their take on the night?
All right, welcome back to News Nation's special coverage of Super Tuesday. We are waiting for results to come in from all those states and all those millions and millions of American voters going to polls today. In the meantime, as we wait, let's bring in 2 Democratic members of Congress, both from North Carolina, Congressman Wiley Nickel and Congressman Kathy Manning. Good to have both of you with us. Congressman Manning, I'd like to start with you. You are one of the members of Congress who are Jewish. And President Biden has taken a lot of hits from the progressive wing of his party and from protesters who feel they disagree with his policy toward Israel. We know that on several ballots today in these Super Tuesday states, there is a uncommitted or no preference option. How do you think he's going to fare in that? It was a pretty strong showing in Michigan. I don't know in the exit polling that we're seeing a lot of Democratic voters, however, really are focused on this.
Michigan and North Carolina are very, very different states. I think that if you look at the polls, the vast majority of Americans support Israel and understand that what's going on in Gaza was caused by Hamas. When Hamas went into Israel, invaded on October 7th, killed more than 1,200 innocent people, slaughtered them, did incredibly horrendous things to people, and then, of course, are holding hostages. They still have American hostages. I think the vast majority of Americans are with Israel and understand that President Biden will stand with our ally Israel, the only democratic country in the Middle East.
And you don't think that, I know you make a good point, North Carolina is not Michigan, but Michigan could be the key when it comes to the general election in November. And if enough Michigan Democrats stay home and don't vote for Biden, that could hurt them.
I think in the long run, people are going to think about what the choice is. With Trump, we have somebody who told us he's going to be an autocrat on day one. We have somebody who stacked the Supreme Court so that we've had rights taken away from us. Look at what happened with the repeal of Roe versus Wade. And with the Alabama IVF decision, that idea that rights are being stripped away is going to be on the ballot. I think people will think about that choice.
All right, Congressman Nickel, you have actually said to President Biden you think that he could win North Carolina this time around. Why do you think that's possible?
You know, I think this is the state that is going to make the difference in this election. And the road to the White House is going to come through the great state of North Carolina. It's the state that Trump won by the smallest amount. And we are moving, you know, every election closer to being a blue state. We're going to get over the finish line in this one because there is a huge choice and a big difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump.
And I just got to ask you about the governor primary that's happening today. We were just talking a few moments ago about you've got the state attorney general, the Democratic. He's running for the Democratic primary for the nomination, and running and leading in the Republican nomination is a Trump-endorsed candidate, Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, who's said some pretty eye-popping things in the past. What do you make of him? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if you think Donald Trump is bad, Mark Robinson is 10 times worse. He is a far-right extremist, and Josh Stein, our Attorney General, is going to clean up the floor with him. And here's something I think that matters for this governor's race. It'll be the most competitive governor's race in the country. How many Democrats have won statewide on the same ballot that Trump has won statewide in the last 2 elections? There's not many, but Josh Stein is one of them.
So you are predicting that in a general election, Mark Robinson will lose despite this robust endorsement from former President Trump just a few days ago?
Yeah, I think Republicans certainly made the wrong choice. They picked the most extreme candidate, not someone who's going to do anything to try to bring our country together, bring our state together. Mark Robinson, someone who wants to ban abortion and has said the things that you said earlier that are absolutely beyond the pale.
Okay. Congressman Wiley Nickel, Congressman Kathy Manning, thanks so much for being with us from the great state of North Carolina. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks so much.
I have an interesting tidbit of news
What?
that just broke. This is from the New York Times, is reporting that Donald Trump met with Elon Musk about filling in his donation gap, and that people who have spoken privately with Mr. Musk confirm that he has come to the decision that Biden must be defeated in November. Now, that helps me understand a little bit better why he went big today on the Biden should be tried for treason for importing voters. Why doesn't it work for Democrats to say, how would that work exactly? How do you believe that people come into the country illegally and then are so easily made into voters? But I guess it's not a logic thing, it's just a phobia thing.
Well, they're not, but...
I think it's a very simple logic, which is that any mass immigration deal, any comprehensive immigration reform, provides a pathway to citizenship for the 10 or 11 million people here who are here illegally. They become voters.
Not the Senate bill. The Senate bill was very spare on
For
that.
people who are coming now, get fast-track citizenship.
Musk wants Trump back on Twitter. Musk wants Trump back. He needs...
Here's the big question. Is Musk going to give him any money?
All right, we got to go. I don't know why exactly, but we're going to take a break, and then we're going to continue this conversation. The returns are going to keep coming in, and we're going to get a fuller picture. Whether it's about the returns or what they mean, stay with News Nation. We're here for you. All right, it's heating up here at News Nation's coverage of Super Tuesday. It is right now 7:52 and change on the East Coast, and we're just minutes away from big-time polls closing in 5 states. You've got Alabama, Maine, Massachusetts, Oklahoma, and Tennessee. So we're going to check that out and see what happens. Which one of those states do you care about the most, by the way, in this next batch?
If you're Nikki Haley, you care the most about Massachusetts. She campaigned there a good bit. There's a bunch of her. We talked before about those. We used to call them yuppies. Affluent, suburbanite, educated, upwardly mobile folks who are in Boston and suburbs. So that's her chance out of this batch.
Why did you look at me when you said yuppie?
I think
I noticed that.
Man of the people, the dirt under your fingernails. I feel the energy. The shop. It smells like the shop floor out here.
Leland works the land bitter. So Virginia, Trump wins. What's the margin? We still need to know.
Vermont.
Close race. And we're going to see if that is the stand that Nikki Haley makes tonight, although, you know, putatively, she's a proxy, right? She is, if it can't happen for Trump, she's in the best position. I'm here.
And a protest vote.
That's a protest vote, but that is the theory of the case. Why does Nikki Haley stay in? Why isn't she spending her money?
In case something happens.
In case, when it comes convention time, she's the best position.
If she wins Vermont, though, it allows her to argue that the race is changing and that Trump's negatives are catching up with him.
Yes, but You are correct, but you're still losing. So if she is making the case that there are a lot of people in the party that don't want him, okay, you still lose, though. You lose. So then get out, because you can't win. And you're right. A lot of people don't like him. I don't believe that's her story. I think her story is, I'm going to keep getting my money, or I'm going to be careful with my money. And then if something blows up, I'm the only one positioned to come in. And on the Democrat side, they don't have that. And they would have to go open convention. And I think it would be a chaos campaign. But we'll see. And that's why we have to see what the results are and what the margins are. And we will. Now, here's a good tease for you. When we come back, somebody who a lot of people keep asking me, why isn't he on the Democratic primary tickets tonight, about RFK Jr.? It's because he's not running as a Democrat. That's why he was forced to run as an independent. He's going to talk about why, what tonight means, and why he's staying in the race. Bobby Kennedy Jr. is with us right after this. It is straight up 8 o'clock on the East Coast. Nailed it. And why does it matter? Because the polls are closing in 5 states worthy of consideration on Super Tuesday: Alabama, Maine, Massachusetts, Oklahoma, and Tennessee. So as the results come in, now that the polls are closed in those states, and as we wait for the margins in Virginia and Vermont, let's talk to somebody who could figure very largely, not tonight, but in the general. Independent presidential candidate, Bobby Kennedy Jr. Good to see you, sir. First, let's get your take.
Chris, happy to be back.
Thank you. Let's get your take on what tonight means. What are you seeing happen in the country that matters?
Well, I mean, I think tonight is effectively the end of the primary season and the beginning of the general election. It looks like Nikki Haley is not going to get any delegates. And you know, of course, there's you know, Biden is the clear winner and has a straight path to the nomination, as does President Trump. So I think we're now seeing a replay of 2020. This is an election, a contest. That's 70% of the American public say that they don't want a rematch between President Trump and President Biden.
All right, Mr. Kennedy, I listened to your town hall with Elizabeth. You were Sherman-esque that you would not run as an independent. Now you are. Now that you see the weakness of President Biden and the 70% number that you just pointed out, do you regret not staying in the primary, making the case to Democrats in the primary, making your case about what the DNC was doing to you?
Well, I wish I had. I wish the Democrats had you know, made room for a primary election. Our polling was showing that I would beat. Well, President Biden was either losing to President Trump or he was tying him. I was decisively beating President Trump. Even as far back as August, I was beating him by 8 points. I was beating DeSantis by 11 points. And I think other people could have done that too. I think the Democrats, if they'd been more strategic, would have opened the primary and allowed other people to contest it. Had a real election. And instead, they rigged the rules so that people like myself could not contest against President Biden. And I think it was a mistake for them.
I'm curious, when you see the polling showing the weakness that Joe Biden has now among Democrats about something that he literally can't change, which is his age. I mean, you can shift policy, you can try and do something on the border, you can try and goose the economy, you cannot change your age. And just sort of piggybacking on what Leland was just asking you, that's the one thing you can offer as an alternative that he can't change about himself, this enduring and deep concern that people have, fairly or unfairly, that he's too old and he isn't up to the job mentally and physically. Does it give you pause? And is there anything that you plan on doing to take advantage of that, to try and get on the ballot in more states and put forward a robust campaign against him?
Well, we're going to get on the ballot in every state. We collected enough signatures today, 15,000 signatures. I think we have even a 60% cushion in Nevada. That's our fourth state. We're beating our benchmarks in all the other states, so we're very confident we're going to be on the ballot in every state. I wish that they had allowed me to contest the Democratic primary, but that was not in the cards. And in terms of President Biden's age, I think, age is not really relevant. There are people who are 80 years old, 85, 90 years old, who have a very, very strong mental acuity and cognitive capacities. I think that the questions about President Biden right now, because of a number of public gaffes, and his unwillingness to have unscripted conversations or encounters with voters, to do a debate, to do actual interviews with people. And even when he does scripted ones, it's scary for people to watch. And I think a lot of Americans are worried. This is a job that requires complex thinking. It requires nuance. We all want somebody who can answer that phone at 3 o'clock in the morning and make a good judgment call at that point when our children's lives are at stake, our country is at stake. And I think a lot of Americans are now asking questions. And the public, the press, the mainstream press even, is asking the question about whether President Biden actually has that capacity. And I think he really needs to come out and campaign and have these encounters to demonstrate to the American public and to the people of the world that he's capable of that kind of leadership.
Mr. Kennedy, it's Chris Stirewalt. I have a quick question. I have been fascinated watching the tango between you and the Libertarian Party. You've got what they need, which is buzz and interest and high name identification and all of that stuff. They've got what you need, which is ballot access. They'll end up being on the ballot in all 50 states. But I know that you guys are different in some profound ways. You're both disruptors, but they're anti-government, and you have been a proponent for governmental regulation on the environment and a host of things over time. Just talk a little bit about how that romance is going.
Well, I've actually been aligned with the Libertarians on a lot of issues for all of my career. And, my approach to free market, to environmental issues for 40 years, you can go back and look at my speeches for 40 years, has been a market-based approach. That the best thing that we can act, we don't have free market capitalism in our country. We have corporate crony capitalism, and that's what's destroying the environment. If we had true free markets promote efficiency, efficiency means the elimination of waste. Pollution is waste. In a true free market would require us to properly value our natural resources. And it's the undervaluation of those resources that cause us to use them wastefully. In a true free market, you can't make yourself rich without making your neighbors rich and without enriching your community. What polluters do is they make themselves rich by making everybody else poor, and they do that by escaping the discipline of the free market and forcing the public to pay their production costs by externalizing their costs. On this issue and many other issues, I'm very aligned with libertarians. Now, the Libertarian Party is made up of a lot of iconoclasts. So there's all different brands of libertarianism. And, most of them, the one thing they all have in common is that they hate authority. And they mistrust it. And they mistrust government. And so, I love dealing with libertarians. I love speaking with them. But, we'll see if there's a future. For me, with that party, we will get ballot access with or without libertarians. We're on track to do it, and we don't have any doubt that we're going to be in all 50 states and the District of Columbia.
All right. Bobby, appreciate you being with us. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., we'll see you on the long road through the summer here with this campaign. Thanks for being on with us tonight. We're going to jump to News Nation's chief Washington correspondent Blake Berman. He's at the White House on what the Biden campaign is watching. Blake, as you probably know, we just got some returns in for Biden that he logged a few more states. Everything is as expected so far tonight. What are you hearing?
So it's a quiet night here at the White House, Chris. Obviously, for the president, doesn't have a serious challenger on the Democratic side in the primaries, but this is a very big week for him and a very big week for the campaign. Obviously, he's going to be going before the nation for the State of the Union address about 48 hours from now on Thursday evening, which is why the president has had a quiet day and a quiet week. That is traditional, as you know, as presidents sort of build up to this thing. Here's what I'll tell you. From what I've gathered here over the last couple of days, you can expect the Biden campaign to go full throttle in general election mode come Thursday into Friday, after the president gives this State of the Union address on Thursday into Friday. The thinking is that after Super Tuesday, once you start to get some casual tune-in really all across the country, oh, it was Super Tuesday this week. Oh, there was a State of the Union address on Thursday. The thinking is that it'll start to crystallize among the electorate, among the American population, that this is a one-on-one race, that this is a race between Donald Trump and President Biden. And because of that, at least the thinking goes among Democratic circles, that is when you'll start to get the Biden campaign full throttle with resources backing the president to the tilt as they see it. Some of what I heard in conversations this week, Chris. So over here at the White House, again, not a night where there's an especially big Super Tuesday tune-in for them. They're really focused on Thursday, the State of the Union address, and then from the campaign perspective, a big week as a whole. Come Friday, they really start to shift into general mode here as they feel that the country will start to see this. I know you were just talking to RFK Jr., but they start to see this as a one-on-one race, Chris.
Yeah, Blake Berman, high stakes for President Biden with the State of the Union on Thursday on so many levels. Thanks for that live report. We're going to go now to News Nation correspondent Brooke Schaefer, who is live at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach headquarters, where Trump supporters are gathered to celebrate what they are looking forward to. Oops, we've got a bit of a weird signal there. Hopefully you can still know. Is Brooke there or not?
You looked a little green there for a second.
It wasn't me, it was Brooke, but there, now it looks fabulous. It's fabulous. Brooke, what time is the former president expected to meet and speak to his supporters gathered in that ballroom behind you?
Well, Elizabeth, I can tell you the excitement here definitely building as states are called for former President Donald Trump. We are expecting him to take the stage sometime in the 10 o'clock hour. Again, we will be waiting for that here as the excitement builds inside this ballroom in Mar-a-Lago. But we can tell you former President Donald Trump feeling very confident right now. We even learned that he went golfing this afternoon. Senior advisors to the Trump campaign projecting a sweep for former President Donald Trump today. They have long said that Nikki Haley doesn't have the delegate math on her side. They are hoping that a potential sweep today will help them really further solidify that messaging as they already start to look ahead to the general on a Trump-Biden rematch. Former President Donald Trump has a stop in Georgia over the weekend on the same day as President Joe Biden. And another signal, again, that they are focused on a Trump-Biden rematch. We just spoke with a senior advisor to the Trump campaign. We asked them about Nikki Haley. The response from that senior advisor, Nikki who? Elizabeth?
All right, Brooke, thank you so much. Very packed ballroom there. We had a little bit of a signal issue and then a delay issue, but so glad to get her live report. We'll be tuning back in as the night progresses, and obviously for former President Trump's remarks once he gives them. We're hearing news that there might be a bit of an upset perhaps in the mix.
Well, looking just what the AP numbers that are coming in, Nikki Haley's holding her own in Vermont, which is, as we identified at 7 o'clock, that's if she's going to do it anywhere, that's where she's going to do it. And we still don't know in Virginia if she's going to get any delegates because we're waiting for all of that vote in the northern tier of the state, the D.C. suburbs, and a little bit of the Richmond suburbs. But basically, there's 5 or 6 congressional districts where she might get some. On the other hand, on the other side of the coin, out in Texas, That is an old-fashioned tail whooping going on down in Texas right now.
Is anybody surprised?
Just with the raw vote, Trump is up 55 points. It's a, it's a wild ride. So basically, you're seeing a South versus North split in the Republican Party.
Let's give them a little look under the table of what the audience doesn't get usually to hear. So there is a narrative that Texas is changing. Certainly demographically, it's changing. You now have Latino Americans or Latinx or Hispanics or however you want to define them.
No, we hate Latinx.
Is there? Thank you very much.
We hate it.
It's always good to have a proxy.
Okay.
All right, so there's one lawsuit I don't have to worry about. But that is now the largest population in Texas, right?
It is.
So the theory goes that it is therefore becoming more blue, and you see the margins, 15, 9, 5, as if the Democrats may actually win there. Two assumptions. One is that this new demographic will break Democratic.
They don't,
and that they can have the operation of culture within that state politically to ever win on a big level.
Well, I'll give you a real good one. Tonight, Colin Allred is the face of the new political Texas, right? He is a non-white, moderate, suburban Democrat who wants to take on Ted Cruz, and I expect he'll get that chance to take on Ted Cruz. There's a scenario in which Ted Cruz loses, right? Ted Cruz it was awful close for Ted Cruz 6 years ago with Beto O'Rourke. And the story in Texas, such a good point about Democrats misunderstanding the idea of monolithic Hispanic voters.
Which
right?
drives everybody crazy.
Because you're different if you're from Texas than you are if you're from California. And it doesn't matter whether your last name is Gutierrez or Jones.
Is there a basis to say that they are by disposition in any way to break Democrats?
Immigrants are typically, the American story goes like this. When my grandfather McCarthy was when my great-grandparents McCarthy came to the United States, they were Democrats and they bled Democrat blue 100%. 2 generations later, there's no salience for being Irish or Italian or any other of the mass migration at the turn of the last century. There just isn't political salience.
But they break heavy Christian, Catholic, but now emerging evangelical.
You go spend time down in South Texas, which was heavily Democratic and is now turning purple and into red. It's traditional versus progressive values. And as the Democratic Party has changed, which it certainly has, and the Republican Party has changed, so has its demographics. And you talk to people in South Texas, the border issue, if you want to call it that, the immigration issue, is ground zero for them. They're the ones who are getting hit the hardest by it, by the chaos and by the crime.
All right, I got to call some races. DDHQ can now project that Donald Trump is going to win Alabama, Maine, Massachusetts, Oklahoma, and Tennessee. All 5 closed their polls at 8. All expected wins. We'll look at the margins, but those are not supposed to be as competitive. Up next is going to be why they're voting and how this shapes our understanding of the race going forward, certainly on the Republican side. There's a really interesting disconnect. How the voters coming out on Super Tuesday for the Democratic Party and the Republican Party seem to hate what the other one is about. And I'll lay it out for you, and we'll figure out what it means for the general. Stay with News Nation. It's 8:21 p.m. right now, and we're watching the returns come in, and the story of the night is yet to be told, my friend.
It is yet to be told, but it's looking, at least so far, like Donald Trump is poised to have a nice big sweep, except in the state of Vermont, which is the one surprised, a tiny state. Actually, we shouldn't say totally surprised. Chris Stirewalt was saying at the beginning of the show that if she does well anywhere, it will be either in Vermont or Virginia, and you called it right. Right now, it's got what are the polls showing? She's got 51.8% of the vote to no. Hold on. I've got that reversed. Donald Trump has 51.8% of the vote. Nikki Haley has 44.6%.
It's tight. It's tighter than the cap on a jar of syrup, on a bottle of syrup. It's tight. It's
Vermont
tight up there.
maple syrup.
Well, obviously, but they're not taking Canadian imports up there. Look, we don't know because we have to wait until we see by all congressional districts in all these states. How big is that anti-Trump or non-Trump contingency, and how's turnout? So I'm on the edge of my seat.
Right. And thus far, except for Iowa, turnout in all these primaries and caucus states has been good. Let's bring in News Nation political contributor and former White House press secretary to Donald Trump. Sean Spicer joins us. Sean, how are you doing? What do you make of the results we're seeing thus far? And what are you predicting we're going to see in terms of a sweep for Donald Trump tonight?
Well, look, I mean, just from a logistics standpoint, in about 7 minutes, 10 of the 16 states will be done. Then we'll have 5 states and 1 territory to report. But right now, Donald Trump's got to be really happy with the results so far. Chris mentioned a little while ago, Virginia is one state where she potentially could pick up a congressional district. I live in the 8th congressional district here. I'm just checking on the results from Arlington, Alexandria, and parts of Fairfax. Nikki Haley's actually doing pretty well in what makes up the 8th congressional district. That would be at least a small win for her, but statewide, just not going to happen. The thing that's really interesting about tonight that people have to keep in mind is of the states, of the 16, the 15 states and 1 territory, 10 of them, while technically proportional and in accordance with the RNC rules that all states be proportional prior to March 15th, 10 of them instituted rules that said if you get over 50%, the at-large delegates go to that person. Right. This was Donald Trump working the refs well before, while Ron DeSantis was still trying to get in, and tonight he's going to pay off big time. 161 delegates in Texas, 169 in California. Those prizes are going to get him real close to the 1,216 that he needs.
So, but Sean, are there any sort of tiny little warning lights any place when you look at Nikki Haley doing well in those counties in Virginia, when you look at her doing so far very, very close within just a few percentage points in Vermont, when you look at the fact that in all the states thus far, she's gotten about 30% of the Republican vote. Does any of that concern you? Do you think it signifies danger down the road?
No. I was there in 2016. We had a similar group of folks we literally called them the downshifters, people who had been traditional Republicans that weren't going to vote for Donald Trump. Ultimately, we became a binary choice between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Over 85% of them came home. I expect the same thing to happen this time as well, number one. Number two, look at the people that Nikki Haley, NBC News had an exit poll today out of Virginia. She actually was polling better among independents and almost equal with Democrats. She is not winning Republicans. Most of these states are either open or don't have a contest of significance on the Democratic side. Most of the voters, 97% of people who voted for Donald Trump in 2020 are still voting for him. Only 85% of people who voted for Joe Biden in 2020 are still with him. The narrative doesn't add up when you actually look under the hood in the facts. It's a great media narrative. It doesn't add up.
Yeah, and we know that on Thursday, day after tomorrow, President Biden has the State of the Union address. Very high stakes for him on a number of levels. And after that, he plans to sort of go full bore into the campaign. Donald Trump is also hoping to go mano a mano, not having a Nikki Haley nipping at his heels or criticizing him on other stages, in front of other Republican crowds. Do you think she drops out? And Donald Trump's been trying to pretend she's not in the race, ever since he trounced her in South Carolina, but she's still there.
I mean, mathematically tonight, she pretty much is done. She'll technically be done on the 12th. When officially I think he'll cross that threshold. So whether she chooses to drop out tonight, I think the one thing that was interesting, and I think it was Kelly Myers that reported it earlier today, Nikki Haley has nothing on her schedule as of tonight, after tonight. So the big question is, what do they do? I think they might continue to bring in some small donations, but it takes money to wind down your campaign as well. I don't think she wants to personally go into debt on this campaign. My guess is it's 50-50 that she actually drops out tonight versus, say, next Tuesday or in the coming days. It's irrelevant, though. Whether she chooses to make this tonight or the other nights going forward doesn't really matter. It's over for her. I would just say this with respect to the State of the Union. I've been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
I expect Joe Biden to get a sugar high. It'll be a decent speech. He'll read it out. He'll make overtures to the Republicans, talk about working together on issues that he's ignored for 3 years. But a speech is a speech. This race, if you look back the last 2 cycles, 70,000 votes over 3 states in 2020, 40,000 over 3 states in 2016. This is going to be a tight race. in 8 states. That's it. And so ultimately, will he give a good speech tomorrow night? I mean, Thursday night? Probably. But who cares? It's one night, it's one speech, and it's a sugar high. It'll be gone before Saturday.
All right, Sean Spicer, thanks so much. We'll check back in with you if we've got any more great developments. And I'm going to tell you later what Chris's nickname for you is.
Oh.
Should I tell him now? Master of
Nada.
Nada.
Leader of none.
Leader of none.
Said with love, though, Sean, because your analysis was spot on.
I defended you, Sean, just
Well,
FYI.
my nickname might not be appropriate for television, so I'll leave that at that.
And anytime you want to pass it on, brother, I'll see you nose to nose.
I will,
or nose to belly button.
I will give a little context to what Sean said about sugar highs from State of the Union. Chris, you would agree that there is a lot more to lose than to gain in moments like this. 2022 was one of Joe Biden's great State of the Unions. It really was. It was a phenomenal speech. It was right after the invasion of Ukraine. Bipartisan approval, and his numbers were exactly the same 1 month later.
True.
Really?
But he is an existential crisis right now in terms of, depending on your perspective, whether this is a fake issue or a real issue. And the bar is low enough, I believe, because of how they're criticizing him, that if he is able to read the speech and he seems to know where he is, that there are going to be people who will call us all and be like, see, he's fine.
Until the next time, until Pennsylvania when he's out on the stump.
But on the other hand, if he stumbles, if he has a problem, if something goes wrong, you're looking at the Democratic convention opening up, because Joe Biden is playing it so close to the margins now, right? Because of the concerns within the Democratic Party that since the Hur report can be publicly and openly expressed, now that that's out of the closet and Democrats are actually talking about it, Joe Biden just doesn't have the cushion with Democrats. So
Do you think he has the ability right now, if he decided he wanted to pass the torch, to pass it to somebody without there being an open convention that would be chaos?
It's got to be an open convention no matter what. Now, the question is, there's all different kinds of open conventions. In 1976, there was a technically open convention, but it was, we use this term, brokered, right? It was done, it was agreed on, the delegates were released, and they went to Jerry Ford, and it was fine, fine, fine. What Democrats want to avoid is they're back in Chicago as they were in 1968. They'd like to avoid a redo of 1968. When
riot?
When there was a riot outside and the party ripped itself apart at the seams. But there is a way forward for Democrats if Biden decides that he's going to step back to let the people at the convention do it.
Since 1976, political pundits and anchors have salivated over the idea of a brokered convention in every single election, and we've never gotten one. You're going to have the issue of the border coming up in the State of the Union. That's going to play a big role. What does President Biden do about that?
All right, so let's take a break. When we come back, we'll check in with our border correspondent, Ali Bradley, about the state of play on the border. All right. It is 8:35 and change on the East Coast. The polls just closed in Arkansas. DDHQ can now project President Biden wins or will win the Arkansas Democratic primary. DDHQ can now project Donald Trump will win the Arkansas Republican primary. Not surprises, but again, the story is going to be about the margins in a lot of these races and what that means for Nikki Haley and the GOP race. And we'll take you through it as we get them. But the issues matter as well, Leland, and we know what was on the minds.
For Republican voters, immigration is the #1 issue. We've been talking a little bit about it, what immigration actually means. It's a proxy for a lot of things, especially as you get into Virginia and Tennessee, far, far away from the border, what the immigration issue means. NewsNation Southwest correspondent Ali Bradley live at the border in Eagle Pass, Texas. Ali, we were talking earlier about how Texas is changing, especially near the border. Towns that were deeply blue now going red just because of this issue.
Yeah, Leland, you're exactly right here. I've talked to several voters who actually would vote Democrat on a normal election. I mean, they're actually considering changing the way that they're voting because they're frustrated at the way the Democratic Party has handled the border. They live it every single day. The people that we talk to down here say it is their biggest concern. Now, we talked with Lupita and Toby, who have lived in Eagle Pass for years. Their families are immigrants. They say their parents came here, and they say they're sympathetic to these migrants and sympathetic to the people that want to come here and have a better life. But the reality is this: they're concerned with who is coming over, and they want these individuals to do it legally. And that is the concern. Month after month, we're seeing record-breaking numbers. In February, our sources confirmed we almost hit 190,000 encounters there at the southern border. That is a record-breaking month for February. And another issue that they're concerned with, again, who is coming over? We know here, and we've been reporting here at News Nation, that we don't have access to the criminal databases of the majority of these individuals. We've seen nearly 170 nationalities represented at our southern border. And yeah, the majority of these individuals, we don't know who they are. We are finding out who some of these individuals are. At News Nation, we've been reporting, and today we were able to confirm here that an individual who flagged on the terrorist watch list was actually apprehended. He crossed over the southern border just a week before former President Trump was down here in Eagle Pass. February 21st, this 40-year-old individual from Colombia crossed into Eagle Pass. He was actually apprehended first by Texas DPS, turned over to Border Patrol, where he was processed. And that's when they found out that he had this terrorist hit. Now, he was telling Border Patrol he was heading up to Houston. That was his final destination. And then just a few hours ago, we were also able to confirm that another individual who is actually facing charges right now for vehicular homicide involving a Washington State patrol trooper, he also had criminal convictions. Now, he came in and was first interacted with ICE back in 2013. He came in well before that, though, and they believe he came in as a getaway, someone who was trying to evade. He had multiple criminal convictions since that interaction in 2013, and now he's sitting in jail right now with that ICE detainer facing those charges, Leland, and that is the reality. We're seeing more and more of these individuals tied to these crimes, right? They're calling it migrant crime, and these illegal immigrants we're tracing back to when they crossed over. Many of them crossed over in just the last few years. We've been reporting that here at News Nation, and that, of course, is a concern for these individuals down here at the border.
Yeah, and they are quite literally on the front lines of it. Allie, thank you very much. Allie's point in terms of this issue with people who have committed crimes and not been deported because of sanctuary cities, obviously the alleged killer of Laken Riley being one of them, and now this case in Washington State of the trooper who was killed. Listen for President Trump tonight as he talks to say those names and draw a contrast with whether Joe Biden will say them in the State of the Union.
I think he's got, well, it's not so much just for Trump, but I do think that this reporting that came out about the app, remember the CBP app? The Custom Border Patrol app that allowed for some streamlining of it for people to apply for parole from other countries and come in. So there was reporting today that hundreds of thousands of people have been allowed to fly into the country. The numbers have never been reported to us, which is at a minimum misfeasance, right? You should have told people what these numbers are. And I'm sure they'll find some report that's the size of my head where they'll say it was reported in here. But it certainly wasn't a headline for anybody. And that shows systemic introduction of a population into the country with no good explanation.
Well, look, Joe Biden in 2020 ran on reopening the borders. He said, I am going to take all of the things that Donald Trump has done and the policies mattered. Not only did they change what happened at the border, but it changed the messaging to all of these countries. Joe Biden ran on repealing all of those. He then repealed them. He then held a press conference where he said, I make no apology for repealing them after the numbers spiked. It doesn't seem all that surprising. You're right that it does need to be reported. And I think people will be shocked when they get the 300,000 plus number of people who flew in and were allowed to fly into the United States.
And
stay. But that doesn't necessarily come as a real surprise.
But it does show you that the system is designed to do exactly what you don't want it to. And that's not as simple a fix as the catch and release.
Well, no, maybe it makes the fix even easier, right? Because we talked about the Laken Riley alleged killer was an illegal immigrant. So many people were saying, oh, he slipped through the cracks. Oh, this was a breakdown in the system. It wasn't at all. The system worked exactly as designed. He came over, he had a very flimsy asylum claim. He was released into the United States. He went to New York, which is a sanctuary city, arrested, let out, and then showed up in Athens, Georgia, also a sanctuary city. The system worked exactly the way it's designed. You change the system, you get different outcomes.
One of the problems with negative partisanship, in which you don't have to, Joe Biden used to like to say anyway, don't judge me by the almighty, judge me by the alternative. So that's a good, folksy encapsulation of negative partisanship. It's not about me, it's about how bad the other guy is. The problem with that kind of thinking, and why we can't have nice things, when Republicans said, Obamacare is the pits, we hate Obamacare, we hate Obamacare. Okay, congratulations. You have the White House, you have the Senate, you have the House. What are you going to do? We didn't actually think about that. We didn't actually have a plan for that.
We just promised one.
Democrats said Donald Trump puts kids in cages. His immigration policy is inhumane. When we get in there, we're going to be better. It's going to be great, da-da-da-da-da. And they went in there, popped the champagne. They said, we did it. And they said, oh, my gosh, this is a layered, complicated, multifaceted, global problem that does not have...
But you don't have to be in the fixing business. The story of the demise of the democracy is tied up with problems being enough.
Yes.
And problems work better than solutions. We just got to see it, unfortunately, in real time on the Senate immigration bill. Not perfect, but certainly not a bad bill. You had 10 Republican senators who were fine with it and a dozen House members from the GOP that helped negotiate it. But they said out loud, no, the problem works better. We need it for the campaign.
Yes.
Don't do it. And the only time we've seen it where you went for the fix and you got it, and now you have to deal with what you wanted, is on reproductive rights, where they eventually got the court to where they wanted it. They got rid of Roe, and now the dog has caught the car. And you see that with a lot of people in this country, they did not want the dog to catch that car.
Well, and you've created a host of other problems, because if you start with the premise that from conception, it is life. Okay, what do you do in IVF? You know,
that's exactly
there are
right.
all sorts of other
That's
issues.
why problems are better than solutions in a zero-sum game. It's better to say, this is terrible, I blame you. Anyway, we're going to take a break.
I didn't do it.
At least you pointed at Chris, not me, okay?
Too handsome to point at you. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we have Congressman Tim Burchett. Now, very apropos of this conversation we're having, Burchett is a disruptor. He is somebody who tells you, hey, it's not about the two parties, Cuomo. It's about the uniparty. It's about the money and the leverage, and we can't do anything if they don't let us. What does he think about tonight and what's going to matter going forward? We also have the big names, Bill O'Reilly, Geraldo Rivera, the wise men. Coming up. All right, 8:49. Why does that matter here on the East Coast? Because that means in a few minutes we're going to have a new batch of returns, because the polls are going to be closing in Colorado, right? Very important state in terms of the state of play with what's happening with the Supreme Court, Minnesota, and of course, the big Texas, #2 population, #2 economy in the country. So let's talk about the state of play in this election and what really matters to you at home. Tennessee Republican Congressman Tim Burchett joins us. It's very good to see you, Congressman. Thank you for taking the opportunity.
Thank you, Chris. It's always a pleasure, brother.
So, Congressman, let's talk uniparty. When people say, boy, you guys don't do your job in Washington, D.C., shame on you for just hating on each other all the time. You say there is a massive elephant in the room, no disrespect to the Republicans, animal namesake there. But what is the uniparty, and how does it mess with your ability to get things done?
Well, it's Democrats that will vote like Republicans and Republicans that will vote like Democrats. And it really just, maintains the status quo. That's what we do when we pass these CRs, continued resolutions, because both sides gripe about what we're doing in Washington, yet we pass a continued resolution that continues to fund bad policies. And we've been doing that for 20 years. I mean, I completely believe we have parts of departments that we're funding that are no longer in business, but the money goes to those departments. So, the Pentagon, they've lost over $500 billion in assets. And how did we punish them? $20 billion new dollars in the NDAA that we passed a few weeks back. So yeah, it's like your dad and my dad. You're an old school Democrat. Dad was an old school Republican. they'd fight it out. They'd still be friends at the end of the day, but they wouldn't concede in their core values. These folks have no values. It's just keeping them in power. That's what their values are about.
So when you talk about, it's interesting, Republican orthodoxy, conservative orthodoxy was always, whatever it costs, we got to take care of defense. There seems to be a changing understanding of what that really means and where it is as a priority. And you have membership in this new club. What is your take on the right way to look at defense spending?
Well, these forever wars that we're in right now, see, we're funding both sides. I mean, Iran, all this horrible stuff over there. Well, when we removed the sanctions on their oil production, they've made record profits. Russia, we did the same thing early in Ukraine with their gas profits. Same thing. We were funded. We had contracts with Russia, yet we were funding Ukraine. You just go down the list. It's very obvious to me that our war is for making money. And the people at the Pentagon, I call them war pimps. It makes people uncomfortable, but their business is war, and their business is very good.
Yeah,
old men make decisions, and young men die, and that's currently the state of business in warfare today.
You got a very limited audience that won't take offense to being called a pimp. Let me ask you something. Do you believe that Nikki Haley has worn out her welcome in this process?
I don't think she's worn out her welcome. I just think, she's she's a friend of mine, so I don't know what's going on in her inner thinking or in her inner circle. But, she's wanting to protect her brand. She eventually sees some, maybe in this administration somewhere down the line, or possibly in the media. The more she keeps her name out, the more she keeps fighting. Her name recognition still goes up, regardless if it's bad. And people are very forgiving in this. These guys. Well, look at Biden and his vice president. I mean, they were cussing each other. She was calling him everything but a dog.
I was the woman on the bus. I was the woman on that corner. It was one of the most effective broadside attacks, almost calling him a racist, really. And she wanted to get this. So, to your own point, does that mean Nikki Haley has a chance? And do you think Trump should consider her as a VP to kind of close any gaps that she may fill in the party, although I think the people voting for her are largely independent Democrats that he wasn't going to get anyway, or they're just people who don't like him who would have voted for anyone but him. But do you think she should be looked at as VP?
Well, it's like the line in Dumb and Dumber. He says you got one chance, 1 in a million. He says, you think I got a chance? I just don't think she has a chance. I think Trump's got some ideas who he wants to pick. I think he knows who he's going to pick already, regardless of what everybody says. And you'll have members of my party floating their own names out, and like, talking to Trump or leaking it out to the media. But Trump's a little smarter than that. And one thing I think he will do this time, before the uniparty kind of got in there with him, and I think 86'd a lot of his good ideas, I think he's going to go through some of these alphabet agencies like Grant through Richmond, brother. I think he's going to cut them to the quick if he gets the opportunity, because I think enough people have gotten his ear this time and told him who did him in, because it's just so big. It's not a swamp. It's not an ecosystem created by God. This is an open sewer created by man.
Well, I hear you, Congressman, and the American people will probably give you an amen, but they'll also remember he went in there promising to clean the swamp, and all he did was add alligators. It was one of the most, riddled with every kind of perfidy administration that we've seen. So if he gets back in, he can only do better. Appreciate your candor. You're always welcome here at News Nation. The conversation is to be continued. I kind of missed the coat, I'm not going to lie, but it's good to see you, Congressman.
Oh. It's on the floor. It's above 60.
That's where it should be. It should be on the floor, that coat. I'll tell you that.
Being a semi-exotic model.
All right. I got to go to break, Congressman. Thank you very much. It's good to see you. Let's take a break. We'll be back at the top of the hour with calls in Colorado, Minnesota, Texas. It matters. We'll see you then. Top of the hour, 9 p.m. on the East Coast. That means we have a new batch of data. Polls have closed in 3 states, Colorado, Minnesota, and Texas. Right now, DDHQ can project Donald Trump will win the Republican primary in Colorado and Texas. What are the margins? Why did they vote for him? We will see. DDHQ can also now project that President Biden will win the Democratic primary in Colorado, Minnesota, and Texas. Not as big a result, obviously, although there may be something inside the numbers on the Democratic side about what matters that we'll get into soon.
All right, Bill O'Reilly is joining us now. He is the host of the No Spin News. Here to give us all of his analysis. Bill, what do you make of the results so far, of the fact that Trump seems to be winning handily, although in Vermont, Haley's giving him a run for his money?
Well, I'm very angry at Donald Trump because driving here to the News Nation location, I had to go by Mar-a-Lago, and the traffic is backed up to Delaware because Trump is having a victory celebration, and I was caught in that, and I'm really teed off.
Okay.
So that's about it. Everybody knew that. Everybody knew that Trump was going to win because he's built in 37% of the primary vote with the MAGA people, and nobody could overcome that. As far as Vermont is concerned, you know, they're troublemakers up there. Everybody knows that. They don't like him. And so they went with Nikki Haley, who they don't like either, but she's better than Trump. I think the story, though, going forward is Nikki Haley.
How so?
I think that she'll get out. She'll get out this week, maybe tomorrow. I know that because she has no media buys scheduled. And that's always the key. If the candidate has no media buys, that means they're done. She's done. But I think it was a noble effort by the ambassador's part. You know, to have no one run, or the Democratic side like Marianne Williamson, okay, but come on. But Haley was articulate. She stood her ground. She made some excellent points on abortion and other matters. And I respect the fact that she put herself out there.
And where do you think
she will run again in 4 years?
And where do you think her voters thus far go? Because so far she's averaging about 30% of the Republican voters in all of these contests overall, give or take. I mean, we've been discussing this with others and amongst ourselves. Do you think all her voters then track back toward Trump? Or do some of them break for Biden?
No.
What do you think?
No. If you're a Republican, you're not voting for Joe Biden. So I think that what will happen is she will endorse Trump. She has to. If Nikki Haley does not endorse Trump, the RNC will not support her candidacy in 4 years. And the reason she stayed in so long was to raise money. Remember, if you are donated to as a political candidate, you get to keep that money. You can't spend it on personal stuff, but you get to keep it. So she'll have a nice little war chest ready for her when she launches for 08. But she's got to play the game. And the game is you get out now, which she will, and you endorse Trump, which she will.
So Leland, who's sitting next to me here, says that he thinks Trump will pick her as his vice president. You did?
I said I think there is a reasonable chance.
Okay. Do you think he's right, Bill?
Okay. Well, first of all, I feel sorry for you, Elizabeth, having to sit next to Leland. And I hope that the management of News Nation puts a little something extra in your paycheck, because that's pretty tough, especially for 18 hours or however long you guys are on.
Hey, Bill, I'm sandwiched between Leland and Chris Cuomo.
Well, you know, Cuomo's a whole different story.
Do the audio guys have a tiny violin?
You gotta watch. You got to watch the Hairspray with Leland. That's lethal. There's no way on this planet that Trump picks a strong-minded woman like Nikki Haley.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. All right? So he's going to select someone that he doesn't have to worry about, that is going to be 100% Trump, do what he says. I'm going to tell Trump now, I hope he's watching, that his vice presidential candidate should be the governor of Arkansas.
Really?
Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Oh, absolutely. There's no question that that is by far and away Trump's best play. She is smart. Trump trusts her because she did the press for him. She's conservative. She's wired in. The voters like her. Independent Republicans like her. That is far and away the best choice for Donald Trump, and I hope he is listening and takes my advice just for a good competitive race. I can't say I'm not rooting for anybody. My upcoming book is Confronting the Presidents, and I say that Joe Biden's the second worst president in our history. So I can't root for the second worst president to have another 4 years, but I'm going to be fair in my analysis.
Okay. I just want to ask you to look ahead. This might be just like putting fresh meat in front of you, but Joe Biden has his State of the Union address on Thursday night. Very high stakes. There's a lot going on in this country. We see a country deeply divided, deeply polarized. Republicans are very up in arms about what's happening along the border. Democrats are up in arms about reproductive rights. Everybody's concerned, both Democrats and Republicans, about his age and mental and physical fitness to serve as president of the United States for another 4 years. What are you looking for in this speech, and what kind of impact do you think he can make?
Okay. So the reason that Biden hasn't shown up for work for 4 days is because he's been at Camp David rehearsing his speech. I understand they're going to keep it tight. So maybe 40 minutes, but that's a long time to read the teleprompter without faltering. I mean, if you watch Cuomo every night, you know, if he gets by 6 minutes on the prompter without flailing, I mean, that's good. 40 minutes, Joe Biden's going to have to, you know, say what he says. And I can tell you right now what he's going to say. But if he melts down, if he can't get through the prompter copy, if he's garbled, if he hesitates, he's through. And so is the Democratic Party in November. That's how high the stakes are. I call it Dubious Thursday. Super Tuesday, not so super. Dubious Thursday, people are going to be watching to see if the President of the United States can get through this address. And I think they're taking odds on it now.
All right. Bill O'Reilly, thanks so much for joining us tonight with your pithy commentary.
All right.
It is much appreciated.
And my apologies to Leland and Cuomo for insulting them, but, you know, what else can I do? Elizabeth, you know the situation I'm in. I have to do it.
Oh, yeah, I do. All right. Thanks, Bill.
The sincerity of that apology.
You know what I really like about him? Nothing. Thirsty Thursday would make more sense because
Thirsty Thursday, that's great.
The desperation for our non-conservative, fair-minded Bill O'Reilly, who just assumed as a matter of fact that Joe Biden is the second worst president ever because he thinks he is, so now it's a fact, is that they want the standard of judgment on Biden to be that he can't speak. Like, that is what they're not going to listen to the policies. I really wish this, and it's not just because of some, you know, idealistic thing, let's talk policies. I think it's the best move for the GOP is to go after the policy argument with the Democrats, specifically on immigration, specifically on the economy. I think they're better off with policy than personality, but they can't get past the reductive game of saying this guy's a bad guy.
So think about, and you know, we're seeing in the numbers we have, and we're seeing in the exit polling done for the Associated Press, and we're looking around. So think about these Haley voters, and most of her voters are Republicans. 10% or so, and this is rough, are Democrats, and they don't matter because they were going to vote for Biden anyway. They weren't going to vote for Trump anyway. But think about the marginally attached 20, 30% of Republicans, right? So Republicans don't just need them to go vote for Donald. They need them not to vote for Joe Biden, but they need them to turn out, right? Yeah. They got to come out.
Yeah, he just said just now, Republicans will vote for Trump.
So,
I don't think you can take that as a given.
So
he said Republicans won't vote for Biden.
True.
But they may stay home.
They may stay home.
Will they show up? So this is what
but I don't know.
This is my thinking. This is my thought. It's easy for Democrats to scare their voters about Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a self-fulfilling attack ad, right? He just writes his own. Every day that Donald Trump is in the news, the more Trump is in the news, more scared Democrats get. How scary is Sleepy Joe, right? Sleepy Joe Biden is not that scary. If he's too old. Now, Republicans have tried, Nikki Haley tried, and many Republicans have tried to make Kamala Harris the issue but that's a tough leap. Joe Biden may be depressing, but he's not scary to Republicans the way that Trump is scary to Democrats.
What about the fact that even 30 years ago, Joe Biden couldn't read prompter very well. Some people are not, that is not his gift.
Biden's problem is we watched it happen, right? If you look at Joe Biden in 2012, when he and his big choppers were gnawing Paul Ryan down to a stub during their debate, and you see him in 2012 and you see him now, you can plot the decline. With Trump, Trump's been wacky the whole time. When we met Trump in 2012 talking about Obama's birth certificate, he was wild and crazy and saying all kinds of stuff.
He's also had a few more instances, and as well chronicled and circulated on social media, he does it on camera, where he too has lost the plot in the middle of speaking extemporaneously.
For sure, for sure, for sure.
But they're not judged the same way.
They are not.
One of them is an agent of a huge cut of America's legit disaffection, fear, and grievance with things. And they believe Trump, is the disruptor who can attack and break the things they want attacked and broken.
Trump has one built-in advantage to that point, which is, yes, there are a lot of Democrats who are motivated against Donald Trump. There are actually Republicans who are motivated, as you point out, strongly for Donald Trump. I don't know any Democrat who is strongly for Joe Biden.
Yeah, it's all about what Chris is talking about. It's all,
no, you're right.
Biden is too much. Look, I go after the party system all the time, right? Democrats come after me with impressive zeal about how, but not now. You're right, but not now, not with Trump. And I say it's always like that. Look, Trump is unique, but this is always the most important election. It's always that nothing can change right now. It's always that way. And, you know, even as we were just hearing from Burchett, you know, nothing changes if nothing changes. It's always been about money pulling their strings. It's always been about the politicians doing what gets them the donations. And in this two-party system, it's always been about them. And it's always about trying to lock out voters and make it hard and then get in there and do what they want so they can get elected again. Nothing changes if nothing changes. We're going to take a break. When we come back, Nikki Haley, did she win Vermont? Can she win Vermont? Does it matter if she wins Vermont? That is really going to be the best headline she has coming out. And it's 9:12 now in the East, okay? You're not going to get California till 11 o'clock in the East. When do they speak? And who speaks first? Trump is having the night he was supposed to have. Does he decide to call it a night? Stay with us. All right, welcome back to News Nation's Super Tuesday coverage. It's all about the numbers. Let's bring in Connell McShane. What do we know now?
Well, I'm going to call this the halftime report of the Republican night, and we'll start where we started the night in the state of Vermont and Virginia, really. We talked about it the first hour a lot. This is the place, if Nikki Haley's going to get a delegate tonight, where she'll pick it up, right? The thing is, Donald Trump's pulled out ahead now, 49-47. It was even Steven, about 48-48 for a little while. If Trump gets over 50, though, it's lights out for Haley in terms of delegates tonight. That's the way it is. It's a winner-take-all in Vermont, like so many of these other states. You get over 50, but she's making a very, very close race of it. In Vermont, you know, it's a state that Trump lost big time last time around to Joe Biden, so a big Democratic state, even though it does have a Republican governor, one that doesn't like Donald Trump very much, and Nikki Haley's doing well there. All right, let's switch it up. Virginia. Now, the 50% number, again, applies in Virginia, and Trump is well above it at 65%. So we could, you know, dig into some of those counties in and around Washington, D.C., as we were earlier in the night, and say, oh, Haley's doing okay here and there. At the end of the night, it doesn't really matter. In Virginia, Trump's getting the margins much more so than he needed. North Carolina is the third one I want to highlight, because why? It's really the only toss-up state we had on the map tonight. Donald Trump on the Republican side dominating in the state of North Carolina with 3/4 of the vote. He's up at 74% to Nikki Haley's 23%. And finally, Texas, watching it for a few different reasons, including the Republican primary one is expected easily by Donald Trump at 74%, but we'll watch the results come in from Texas on the Senate side as well. Remember that former NFL player, Colin Allred, on the Democratic primary is expected to win tonight. He's up in that race, and then he would be going up against Ted Cruz in the fall. So I know the Democrats have always wanted to win statewide in Texas. We'll see what they come up with on the Senate race. But for right now, Donald Trump is putting up big numbers on the presidential side. Of course, immigration, guys, we talked about, had been the story and was the story in the state of Texas. So there you go.
It sure is. Wow. Okay. Thanks, Connell.
So we got Virginia Republican.
Bob Good is here, chair of the House Freedom Caucus, and also noteworthy because you endorsed Ron DeSantis before endorsing Donald Trump. Congressman, good to see you. If you look at the numbers that are coming in now, does it either A, reinforce your initial position that Donald Trump has an electability issue, thus the DeSantis endorsement, or B, show that he has coalesced enough power within the Republican Party to then break out and have a meaningful chance to beat Joe Biden?
The Republican Party is unifying behind President Trump. Nikki Haley is catering to Democrats, independents, those who don't typically vote Republican. She's literally reaching out to Democrats to try to get them to vote in Republican primaries. It's time to rally behind who will be our nominee. That'll be Donald Trump. He's in strong position, I think, in the polls for November. Everyone across the country recognizes they're worse off than they were 3 years ago. There's no standard of measurement that you can point to where you would say the Biden administration has been successful. We're less safe, we're less free, we're less prosperous, whether you're talking about the open border, whether you're talking about the inflation under which Americans are suffering. I think Americans will be voting for a change, and that change is Donald Trump.
All right. You look at what's happening in your home state of Virginia that went for Glenn Youngkin in 2021. Glenn Youngkin flipped it by 10 or 11 points. You see anything in the data now to suggest that Virginia is in play for the general?
Well, Virginians are suffering like everybody else across the country. Virginia is a purpley state. I'd like to say it was a red state, but it's a purple state, as evidenced by our state legislatures, which are split almost exactly down the middle. We got a one-vote majority for the Democrats in both houses. We had a one-vote majority for the Republicans in one of the houses last term. So I do think Virginia is in play. I think that, again, Americans are so much worse off. This is a president who has made Barack Obama look moderate. That's hard to do. He has made Jimmy Carter look competent. That's hard to do. He's the worst president of modern times, and I think many people, again, recognize they sure wish Donald Trump was still here. They liked his policies. They were working for them.
Well, Joe Biden, though, is the president. That means he gives the State of the Union address 2 nights from tonight. Look, we've seen, along with just the generic civility in Washington kind of go to the wayside, the civility during the State of the Union has gone as well. Has Speaker Johnson given Republicans any admonitions about behavior during the State of the Union when President Biden's there?
What we're focused on is the policy failures of Joe Biden and the suffering the American people are enduring under this president. There's a lot to criticize. There's a lot to attack. Again, everyone is worse off. Our military's been weakened and depleted. Our respect on the national stage. We got rising violent crime. You get the surrender of American energy dominance. You've got the climate environmental extremism this president has focused on. Again, Americans are suffering under the inflation. They're paying about $1,000 a month.
Forgive me. Good points in terms of how some voters feel. There was a question in there, though. Has Speaker Johnson said anything to Republicans about how to act during the State of the Union?
That's kind of a silly question. Of course not.
Oh, okay. All right. Fair enough. Congressman, we appreciate the time. Thank you very much. Good to see you.
Great to be with you guys. Thank you.
Well, why is it silly when there are constant orchestrated antics
heckling,
on both sides of the aisle
booing,
about what to do?
jeering.
I mean, look, I guess you got to give him a pat on the back for getting in line, right? Especially after he backed DeSantis. I guess he's the last guy who's going to call out any of the leadership.
Yeah.
He's already a wanted man. But witness the game, my brothers and sisters. Witness the game. It's a silly question. Yeah, sure it is. He also didn't answer it. Mark Davis, conservative talk show host based in Dallas, Texas. One of the best smiles in the business. Wasted on radio. Mark Davis, good to see you. How are you?
Great to be with you guys. It's a big night.
So handsome. Why is it a big night? What are you thinking down there in Texas?
Texas is reflective of virtually every other state in the union except Vermont and D.C. and those other outliers where we have exactly the kind of Republicans that are being shown out to pasture. The corporatist, globalist, forever war, college-educated, professorial nudniks who are just being shown the door. Real Republicans, real conservatives are the party of the working class. It is Trump's party. How many states does Nikki Haley need to be shown this fact? And will she get out tomorrow and stop helping Biden win? That was the stuff I was dealing with on the show this morning, and we'll see if we get those answers tomorrow.
How many of the people in your circle, starting with you, think Nikki Haley should get serious consideration for the ticket?
Oh, for the ticket as Trump's running mate? How close can I get to 0? It's fine if you have a running mate who kind of brings a constituency that you don't. It's what made Mike Pence a pretty smart running mate for Trump in 2016. But Mike Pence was not antithetical to so many of the things that Trump believes in, and Nikki Haley is. She is reviled, fairly or unfairly, by many in the base. That is a horrible look. And I don't know if you need an exact MAGA twin. I think there are some names in there that expand Trump's appeal. What Nikki Haley needs to do is hang this up tomorrow and play nice and save her Republican future and not commit political suicide and say, look, I beat all the fellas except one. Now this lady is going to help Republicans do the only thing that's important, and that's beat Joe Biden.
Who do you think the VP should be? O'Reilly said on the show that it should be the Arkansas governor, Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
I'm a fan of Governor Sanders, and it's kind of funny because if we get, and as a conservative, I'm the guy who doesn't care about the pigment or the plumbing, as we say. I don't care what sex you are, I don't care what race you are. I care about your head, your heart, and your spine. So Sarah Sanders is great. Elise Stefanik is great. Kristi Noem, somewhat less so. Byron Donalds is interesting. I love Ben Carson, but let's have somebody who's under 70, please. So it probably doesn't matter as much as we think it does, because Trump will consume all the oxygen. Whoever his running mate is will be just fine.
Ben Carson. What a curious genius he is. Do you remember the conversation I had with him where his eyes popped open and he said, answer me this, Chris. Why is it that men go to prison and they're not gay, and then they're gay in prison? Doesn't that show it's a choice? And I was thinking to myself, this man is a genius, and he is asking me this crazy nonsense right now. I don't think he's getting the pick.
No, I don't either. In fact, it may well be that all the people who are on the so-called short list, there's some reference paid to Lee Zeldin out of New York. It may be a really surprise pick where Trump just kind of throws us a curveball that would be very much like him and takes somebody. Honestly, right in my own neighborhood, Congresswoman Beth Van Dyne in the 24th District of Texas. She's great, kind of unknown. She'd be instantly famous. The reason I mention her is it may be somebody that we're not even talking about right now.
Like one of his kids.
Oh, gosh.
Like Doug
Burgum. Well, there's a reason we're not talking about that. No, Laura will be busy as co-chair of the RNC.
Not his kid. It's his daughter-in-law, but close. Appreciate you very much, Mark Davis.
Kids-in-law.
Thank you very much. Good to see you as always.
Always.
All right, we'll take a break. When we come back, Nikki Haley. Mark Davis, pretty harsh, pretty strong, pretty direct. Get out. What are the options for her next move? We're going to go through it with one of her biggest supporters. Stay with News Nation. All right, DDHQ can now project that Mark Robinson will win the Republican primary for the North Carolina governor. DDHQ can now project Josh Stein will win the Democratic primary for the North Carolina governor. Let's go to Connell McShane in the wall with the numbers.
Yeah, look inside these numbers. This will be a really interesting race in the fall with Roy Cooper, the Democratic governor of North Carolina, being term limited. So on the Republican side, to start there, this turns out, as it was expected to be, an easy night for Mark Robinson, the first black lieutenant governor of the state, gets nearly 65% of the vote that's come in so far. So that's why we're able to call that race and call it quite easily. So when Robinson matches up in the fall, you know, this is a state, the only true toss-up, as we've said, that's really on our Super Tuesday map, the state of North Carolina, where he'll be going up against, and let's flip over to those Democratic numbers, Josh Stein. And now Josh Stein is the state attorney general, again, running away with this. He was expected to win and does with 73% of the vote. He worked on that big opioid settlement in the state of North Carolina, Ivy League educated. Josh Stein, the first Jewish governor of the state, if he does win in the fall. But this will be one of those races that we'll watch. We know the presidential race will probably be close, but Elizabeth was talking about it earlier, that for a lot of reasons, this governor's race might even be more interesting in North Carolina.
That's going to be something to watch.
Now we know the matchup.
And he just, Lieutenant Governor Robinson just gave a speech about 20 minutes ago in North Carolina. People were watching very closely to see if he'd be throwing more red meat out there, but he kept it very brief, and it'll be curious to see.
There's a down ballot effect for both parties tonight, because we're finally starting to see swing states and key races down ballot come in. So when you have huge MAGA turnout for Trump, you're going to get MAGA candidates down ballot.
Right.
Democratic side, if Joe Biden had a progressive challenger, right? So let's say that Elizabeth Warren had run against Joe Biden, which I bet she wishes she had. But let's say he had one of those challengers. And you had, so in North Carolina, you get a MAGA candidate for governor, and you get a moderate candidate on the Democratic side. In Texas, they're going to get the Democrats are going to get who they want. They're going to get Colin Allred, who can give Ted Cruz a real race, because there isn't that contest on the side. So the down ballot consequences here we're starting to finally see. And the big question for Republicans is, can they break this cycle of having good momentum, going against weak, unpopular incumbent president, but making weird candidate selections down ballot? And North Carolina is a place where they could give one away.
I just have to read to you guys a tweet from Congressman Dean Phillips of Minnesota. He said, "Congratulations to Joe Biden, uncommitted, Marianne Williamson, and Nikki Haley for demonstrating more appeal to Democratic Party loyalists than me."
Wow.
Yeah.
Ow.
Ow. But, you know, he said it.
So it's an interesting faux pas by him. You never blame the voters. Never. So he is saying the Democratic Party loyalists, right? As if there's this machine. You never blame the voters for an outcome.
Yeah.
Dean should know better than that.
Well, interesting that he grouped in Nikki Haley there.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that he names all those other people, but the point he's trying to make is that this system's busted, this culture's terrible, my party's terrible. And I'm fine with that on a systemic level, but you never blame
Isn't that the kind of the same point that RFK Jr. made?
Yeah.
Yes, but he, my distinction on it would be Bobby's blaming
the party system.
Yeah, the mechanics
Well,
and the
hold on. I
management.
mean, just to be fair to Dean Phillips, and full disclosure, I've had him on the show a number of times. I know you have. I've seen him socially and know him socially. So, but to be fair, he says Democratic Party loyalists. You could also read that to be he's blaming the DNC and the machine inside the Democratic Party that essentially closed the primary off to him and to Kennedy, refused to have any debates, moved the primaries out of Iowa.
And I would agree with that criticism. I bet you if you look at the comments over time, not that he'll get many, it'll be kind of like Kyrsten Sinema, the senator, when she said she was stepping away. There was enough of a flavor. I actually liked her explanation for leaving, but there was enough in it that the people don't want the right things anymore, that there was a crush on her of, don't you blame the voters, you stink. You're the one who didn't do what you were supposed to do. So it's just you never blame the people. You never tell people that they're the cause of their own problems. You don't do it in politics.
All right. Well, speaking of Nikki Haley, since Dean Phillips just tweeted she's getting more Democratic support than he is, let's bring in Jonathan Bush, Johnny Bush, co-founder of the Nikki Haley Super PAC, Independents Moving the Needle. Johnny, great to have you back on the show tonight. So I got to ask you, we've heard a lot of people harshly say Nikki needs to get out. She needs to get out tonight. She needs to get out tomorrow, this week, and she needs to endorse Donald Trump. I know she has no more public appearances scheduled. Bill O'Reilly said she's got no more media scheduled. What do you know about what her plans may or may not be?
I know nothing, but I know that I have no regrets of any minute or dollar up until this exact moment. It's been great to have somebody with real character that's so admirable on the campaign trail that you can feel positive about without having to kind of cringe or kind of bathe with a wire brush, you know, avert the gaze of your children as you do your voting or donating. So I've been thrilled with it and thrilled with her, and I'm looking forward to following her where she leads me next.
And where do you think that will be? What is the next step, do you think, for Nikki Haley?
It's a good question. I'm not in her ear, as they say, and I trust her judgment. But you know, I think she's done a contrary to the people who are like in a panic, like Oh, we'll lose to Joe Biden if Nikki speaks independently of Donald Trump in March when there's a convention in August. This seems absurd and hysterical to me. I think, in fact, she's probably bringing a lot of complexion to the Republican campaign that will be needed to win. Remember, in the polls between in the Biden-Trump bake-off versus the Haley-Biden bake-off, Haley crushes Biden and Trump is kind of a tie. So maybe Trump's got a couple of things to learn from Nikki Haley and her point of view. And I'm assuming that'll happen with or without cooperation as we get closer to the conventions.
She has really, especially in recent days, really sharpened her attacks on Donald Trump. She really criticized him very hard on calling him out for getting Republicans and calling on Republicans to oppose the border deal negotiated in Congress. She said now it's his fault, the chaos on the border. We need to do something now, not a year from now. Do you think she waited too long before ramping up sharpening these attacks on him in order to differentiate herself, or was that just a no-win situation?
Well, you know, I'm in an armchair, but I'm not a general. I never got past E4 in the Army. So I felt very early on, and many of the folks that were the donors behind our little group wanted to see her come out harder sooner. And I just had an event for her, or helped with an event for her in Portland right before the election here in Maine. And boy, it was much more electricity once she was sort of freed to go directly at the guy. And so I was thrilled with what she ended up sounding like. And I certainly wish she sounded like that earlier. But, you know, it was a very delicate balance. You've got a former president coming back in after being outed. I don't know when the last time we had that. You know, it's a very hard wall to climb to be a former ambassador and a former governor against a former president with such an established deep base in that MAGA crowd. So I can't say she was wrong. In retrospect, maybe a little longer practicing that run.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, either way, she's, you know, whether she gets out tonight or gets out, you know, tomorrow or announces she's done next week, she has won around 30% of the vote in all these states in these primary contests. So she's done a solid job, and you've helped fund her and helped her do that with your super PAC. So, Johnny, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for covering the story.
All right, you take care.
All right, we have an announcement. Yeah. DDHQ can now project Donald Trump's going to win the Minnesota GOP primary as expected. You know, Johnny Bush is a good addition to the mix, I think, for our politics. Big money guy, right? Able to tap other pockets of buddies and use it to do something disruptive. And I think that's very good for the process. He did seem to be on the way out, though, in terms of his understanding.
There was no champagne bottles this time.
No champagne bottles, a completely sober Johnny Bush.
Yeah.
But I do think that that is a good indication within that party, even intra-party politics. Donald Trump is going to have to come to these guys.
Really?
He's going to Elon Musk for money, okay? If you're going to talk to Crazy Sauce about getting money, you're going to go to legit deep pockets. Who you know may be in the fold.
And how does he convince somebody like a Johnny Bush, who, if anything, his only criticism of Nikki Haley was she didn't attack Donald Trump stronger earlier?
The
policies.
Reuters was reporting today that a measure at the RNC to prevent Donald Trump from having the RNC pay his legal fees,
bills.
That it was defeated. When we think about how things go from here, that once Trump, so Ronna Romney McDaniel is headed out at the RNC.
Friday.
Trump's daughter-in-law and campaign manager are taking over at the RNC. Donald Trump has these massive financial obligations that are piling up here in New York and elsewhere, and he's got all of this stuff. The financial aspect of this race is going to change markedly. We have a cash deficit for Trump. He's going to need a lot of money. Elon Musk can help, but they're going to have to turn on the small dollar donor machine at the RNC to deal with Trump's legal bills, to fund out this campaign, to do all that stuff.
And then, we're keeping in mind, Joe Biden has a lot of campaign cash.
Yes, he sure
He's
does.
done well in the fundraising.
Being the incumbent always helps.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we have the one and only Geraldo Rivera with his eyes on what the prize was tonight and what this all means going forward. Stay with News Nation. There he is. Oh, boy, it's giving Leland a run for his money. Best hair in the business. All right, when will former President Donald Trump take his victory lap? We are waiting on it. There is Mar-a-Lago. He's going to be coming, and we will be with him when he does. But first, let's bring in News Nation correspondent at large, Geraldo Rivera. Good to see you, handsome.
Hey, Chris.
So what's your take on the night?
My brother. Well, I think O'Reilly hit it. It all has to do with the traffic outside of Mar-a-Lago. A couple of years ago, in 2022, the midterms, they had a party. Nobody showed up. Trump was still the pariah. There was still a great expectation that there'd be other candidates making a run for the nod. They all melted away. It's the most incredible comeback story in the history of politics. He's the most resilient politician in world history, more than Juan Perón. It is amazing how he has made liars out of half the American people who pretend that they think that the election of 2020 was stolen when there's no evidence to show that. So instead, we have Trump triumphant. Biden, obviously, with no meaningful opposition, also scoring in the 90s. But we got the match that almost nobody wanted. Two guys, the odds are that one of the three of us will be 25% would be dead in 4 years. But the United States will muddle through. I have full confidence of that. But a very unexciting night so far. No surprises. Vermont hung in there for 10 minutes. Then they've fallen by the wayside. It's all about Trump. I think he's the story. Biden will be the story Thursday. It'll all be about the State of the Union. Will he fumfa his way through? Will he master it? It is teleprompter. It's hard to do that monologue and deal with the razzing from the crowds. It will be interesting. Can these two old-timers hang in there until November? It's a very long time. The political punditry will have to seek out enterprise reporting to find out what's still interesting. It will be fascinating to watch how they do that to the story. The conventions will happen. We'll go. The excitement will be in the courthouses. Will Trump be arrested? Will he be bankrupted? There'll be a lot more that we hear from outside the political arena than inside the arena. It'll be what we all hoped it would not be, but that's what we got.
That's a good line. It's all what we hoped it wouldn't be. What does that tell you about what the state of play is in the country right now? And I'll give you a stat for context. There's an exit poll tonight. If former President Trump is convicted of a felony, is he still fit to serve? 53-40 yes among Republican voters. What does that tell you about what the narrative is in the country?
I'm surprised the total was that low, because I believe that it matters not at all. He could be in an orange jumpsuit and it wouldn't matter. The loathing, the fear and loathing of Democrats, of this particular Democratic administration among MAGA Republicans is so intense. It is so impassioned. It is so, in many ways, blind to outside reasoning. I mean, Nikki Haley made lots of good points. She was a terrific UN ambassador. She was very articulate. She was feisty. She stayed in it. She didn't back up to all those guys. She took them all on.
Can't you say the same thing about the Democrats?
She got nothing. She got bupkis.
Can't you say that their rage or their fear or whatever negative adjective you want to ascribe to them is so intense that they don't even see the obvious and the need they had for a primary and to put up a candidate that can make the best argument?
I'm with you. I'm with you. But I think the main responsibility, the blame for that, I put squarely on Joe Biden's shoulders. I mean, there is, and maybe I'm an example of it also, there is an arrogance in us old-timers that want to cling to our to whatever we've accomplished. We're refusing to go quietly into that good night. Joe Biden could have easily stepped aside. It was complicated, of course, because of Kamala Harris and who was going to step up. Would it be the vice president, the natural selection? Was she going to be the anointed successor? And a lot of discord within the Democratic Party about that. But you know, the fact that both these guys hung in there, rallied their bases, got their political machines going, and this is what the American people have. I'm interested to see what the turnout will be tonight, and obviously that will be the only drama I see, aside from the courthouse stuff, going forward to the conventions. What will the interest level be? How engaged will the non-MAGA, non-woke Democrats, how engaged will the center of both parties, to the extent the center even exists anymore? And I doubt that it even exists anymore. You know, I'm still a Republican. You know, and I lament how the party has committed to the big lie, because I really do think it is a big lie.
Right.
I am so sorry, but it is what it is. Trump has prevailed. He's one time, or you know, in court so far, and I think that he will ultimately prevail in court, and obviously at the ballot box, and he could very well be the next president, Chris.
Well, look, there's a lot of truth in what you're saying. Certainly, Trump could win the election. I believe, though, several things. One, party people like you say you're a Republican, are on the wane. You know that there's a plurality in the country right now that doesn't want to be Republican or Democrat. And also, it's not just about age, it's about stage, Geraldo. I have won so much money betting people about how old you are, and we have Google. And I win money all the time because age can be just a number if you've got the brains and the gumption to keep doing what you do best, which you do, which is why you're on TV. Nobody's asking you to leave. They're asking you to do more. All right, I got to jump. Thank you very much, older brother. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, bro.
I mean, come on. If every 80-year-old was like Geraldo Rivera, we wouldn't be talking about age. We're going to take a break. When we come back at the top of the hour, Trump is about to take to the podium in Mar-a-Lago. I was delaying to see if he comes out now. Nope. Let's take a break. Stay with News Nation. We'll be right back.